Okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you for being with us here tonight. I am very pleased to have this panel of inspirational individuals who are each in their own unique way carrying a unique lens and vantage of the tapestry that's being woven around us at this time, as the fourth industrial revolution is being launched, and bring a very heartful, connected lens. So I'm hugely grateful to the work that you each do. Thank you. And the time and the effort, the dedication and the heart that you bring to helping us each understand this topic more. And I'm also grateful for Ava's members who are here live with us this evening for taking, and for everybody who tunes in later, wherever you are, for taking the time out of and within your life to have a greater understanding and a more clear seeing of what is playing out, what the infrastructure and apparatus that's being built around us, so that you can more clearly see it and act with greater agency. So yes, I was inspired to create this panel this evening after I received recently, maybe a month or two ago, an invitation through email, personally here for me and a colleague here at Ava, to join an alternative marketplace. It was called Alternative Marketplace, and it was an online hub, basically inviting me to share my gifts and my learnings, and to learn and to teach, and at the same time to be making money. And it was about bringing real education and full employment in bringing more beauty and truth to this world. So it all sounded very appealing, and it was very much about growing a local economy. So a sense of growing and supporting a local economy, a sense of sustainability. And because I have, about 6 years ago now, I was aware of the launch of 5G, and it was quite I had a baby at the time, and it was quite a terrifying proposition of what I was seeing was being planned in terms of the rollout of technology and where we were going with AI and the Internet of Bodies. And I couldn't quite imagine how we were going to get there, and it was very difficult to speak to people about it, as many of us understand with many subjects now where we are in the world. But what helped me to kind of understand and see more clearly was when I looked into Agenda 21. And Agenda 21 is a worldwide plan that was agreed by 179 leaders, or so-called leaders, in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit. So it's an action plan that is very much framed to solve the ecological crisis that we are facing, and many other problems. But if you look into it, what it really is much more about gaining total surveillance and management and control of all of our Earth resources, and that includes land, that includes food, that includes water, and that also includes us as humanity. So that's where the Internet of Bodies and the data surveillance and the technological infrastructure comes in. So I have quite an eye, having opened my eyes to that, to recognize things when they come in, and having followed this last year and a half the work of Alison McDowell and of Joseph Gonzalez and Deep Didat that we have here tonight, and I've been learning a new language, which is very much the kind of details of how this transition is going to happen and is designed to happen. Because certainly it felt like, how could you get from this place where we are to this place and without anybody noticing? And so yeah, I've been learning this new language, and then so when I received this invitation, it felt fishy to me, and I asked the guy that sent it for more information. He sent me a document of a page or two of information, and it was clear straight away that the key words that I have been learning in this new language about the infrastructure of the fourth industrial revolution and how it's being woven into our lives was all there. So I was being invited to create a smart contract that was functional with the blockchain, and that would give me a digital wallet, and that would allow me to create my own unique cryptocurrency. It would allow me to get paid for learning things that I'm passionate to learn, and it would allow me to teach those things to others and be paid for teaching. And so it struck all the alarm bells, and it was, although I've been listening and learning, and I knew that this was what was being mapped out for us, it was still very shocking when I received that invitation in my post directly, where I was targeted to receive that. And I felt quite confused as I was kind of how to communicate with whoever it was that was communicating and inviting me into this. And but I wanted to gather more information, so I kept kind of just asking questions, and it became apparent that he shared also a lot of knowledge that he around the common law and the straw man, and for those who've looked into that side of things, yeah, just to be aware. So it was quite confusing in terms of like, who is this and what is this, and is this even AI generated, or how have I been targeted for this? So my desire in creating this was to help unpick what this is for others, because I know that there are many who will receive similar invitations and who won't necessarily have done as much extensive research and won't necessarily recognize what they're being invited into. And so I wanted to gather this panel tonight who can shine a light on the detail and help us to see clearly why this isn't something that we'd want to sign up for, why certainly it's not something I'd want to sign up for, and I believe that most people that take the time to listen tonight will feel very similarly. So that's my desire tonight, and we're going to have basically, part of the invitation was something called Lifecoin, and I've looked into that a little bit, and it's this app invitation where you can literally generate money by walking and traveling. You get paid for traveling, so I imagine that's part of the Agenda 21, which is about moving us away from fossil fuels. So you get paid for walking, for taking the bike, for taking the train, and you, as well as then into this exchange where you're literally getting paid for everything. But from what I could gather, you don't get paid very much at all. It's just like absolutely crazy, like actually not worth it. And people will literally, if you sign up for such a thing, and if you're in the economic situation where you feel vulnerable and you need the money, you could literally find yourself your whole life ticking boxes of doing things to gather certain amounts of funds, but I don't know whether the funds would actually even come to anything of any value. This evening we're going to have short presentations from each of our panel members, 15 minutes around about, and then after that we'll have a panel discussion to further kind of unpick some of the key issues and details, and then we'll open the floor for questions from you all. So we're going to begin with Alison McDowell. And Alison, I was introduced to Alison's work about 1.5 years ago, and Alison is, in my opinion, a very humble woman, and she describes herself as an arranger of the blooms in the vase, which I very much love. And she describes herself as a woman that goes wide and not deep. And I, from where I stand, Alison is a woman that goes deep and wide. And there are not many women that are, or there's not many individuals that I know who have the capacity to hold the complexity, like the intelligence and the mind, and communicate the complexity of this profane infrastructure that's being woven around us from a place of heart connection and spirit. And Alison really carries the kind of simplicity, gentle, caring of the mother. And that's a beautiful balance that I find is very, very helpful in bringing this material that's very dense and is the synthetic, is the non-organic world. So tonight Alison is going to speak about the learning economy and about gamified social prescribing on the blockchain. So welcome and thank you, Alison, if you unmute yourself.
Well, thank you. It's very kind. Actually, I mean, I just want to say a lot of the work we're doing this, like I'm sort of the voice of a collective of people that includes all the people on the panel and yourself, and we're all sort of building this together, putting the puzzle pieces together. So, so my background, I'm actually in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the United States, and I started my activism quite a number of years ago around public education. And so my child was in the public system, and I was looking a lot at educational technology and surveillance. And then eventually what I realized is what was being made were global markets for global finance capital. I'm trying to remember, it's ARC, Absolute Return on Kids is in the UK. Among them, the academies groups, these hedge funds were going to bet on packaging up futures of children based on data analytics. And so that was, sorry, there's like a dog barking outside. So anyway, in the city living, right? I don't know why they're feel like they need to do this right outside my window right now. But anyway, so they're creating these hedge fund markets in human capital and children. But now with the fourth industrial revolution that is being planned out, the idea is that there will be limited work for people, and that so we will constantly have to be retrained for new work in things that don't, because there won't be jobs. And so we'll constantly be learning, and it's the learning economy for jobs that we may never be able to get. And these jobs and skills are going to be put on blockchain. And that is part of like a system of building a digital twin for people, that you will have a digital shadow of yourself in terms of badges and behaviors that you have shown and demonstrated. And so in our public schools, which may be different if you guys have children in alternative systems, but it was becoming increasingly behaviorist, increasingly enforced behaviors, good behaviors. And right now what we're seeing is this push for digital, good digital citizens, that they're training kids up to be citizens to comply within this larger system that is inhuman, essentially. And as they're working through the technological systems, and this won't just be for children, this will be for everyone your whole life. You'll never get out of school because you'll always be chasing the next job for the AI. is that they're going to increasingly capture data about you through wearable technology, through biosensors that is being aggregated to this digital twin to feed the hedge fund markets and feed prediction markets around military and social systems and determinations about how society is functioning or not functioning. But the data is also feeding into an attempted plan to build the singularity, which is very overwhelming. But like, that was my analysis, is that it was beyond these global hedge fund markets, and it was beyond making money off of this, but it was actually to trigger the data sets to create a future that was post-human, which is pretty overwhelming. But in the meantime, they're going to sell this, because if you told people this straight up, everyone would just refuse it. They would think that's a terrible idea. And so, they're going to feed you what you want to hear, and they're going to feed you, guess what? We'll have automation. You'll have lots of time to learn. And a lot of what the AI wants you to learn is they want to learn your emotion. They want to learn your spirit. They want to learn all the most human aspects of you, especially like emotional vulnerability, spirituality, all of these things. And so they're going to feed you things like, come online and have an alternative education system, right? And you can learn all of these things, and it will be tracked on blockchain, and it will be so convenient because you'll have this alternate local currency. But what they're not saying is that in the blockchain system, what the AI most wants is interoperable data. Data that has relationality both within yourself and how you're represented over time, your personal development and evolution, but also how you relate to society. Who are your teachers, right? Who are the influencers? So this whole idea of social credit and social clout is all being tracked digitally, ostensibly within this like alternative economic system. But the real value is in the data that you're creating. And so if you look, there's a person named Alex or Sandy Pentland out of MIT. A lot of this is coming out of Massachusetts Institute for Technology, which is essentially the war machine in the United States, and very high tech. And so what Sandy Pentland has been working on for at least 15 years is social physics, and using those relationships of using technology to track social relationships among people, and then to add weight to them. So if you are an influencer, you will have more weight than someone who is less influential, and to use these systems to make predictions. Now, if you can imagine what's planned is that as you create a digital twin of yourself with all of the data you're doing by learning things and tracking all of your connections that you've made in the social media sphere and your learning environment as a digital twin, they can start to tweak the model, whether that's an individual model or a social model, in such a way, and their intention is that the tweak in the system in the digital version of you can start to influence the real you. So imagine if a lot of this is based on digital twins for machine engines, that you've got a machine engine and you have the digital model, and you want to figure out how to optimally run the real machine engine. And so you take the model and you run it a lot of different scenarios until you find just the right thing according to how you think the engine should run. And then you port the settings back over to the real engine. But picture that with your brain and your educational process. They collect all of this data, and then they say, okay, based on a future that we decide for you, we will run our simulations and we will optimize you to what we think you should be in this future, which is a future where most people are not thought of. Like, we're just talking animals and livestock to them. And then they project that forward onto your actual beingness through how you relate to people, the built environment, because it's all connected to sensor networks. And not that it will exactly happen the way they plan, but they can actually influence the real world based on a model. And what we're seeing now is, even within COVID, like, that has never been isolated. What we are seeing now is the world transformed by a computer model. That computer model was built from fragment material of 3 different sets of fragments at the University of Chicago that is running these human capital markets. So the whole world has changed based on a computer model. Like, we're already there, we're already to that point. So I will just say that understanding this lifelong learning is about the hedge fund markets. It's about digital twins, which are somewhat represented by your straw man in that sovereignty discussion. It's like the straw man becomes your digital twin, and that is the connection. That there's a portal between the two, between your digital twin straw man and your real you, and that is your digital wallet. And that is your blockchain wallet. And they will sell it to you as if it's currency, but it's not. It's this umbilical cord between the digital world and the real world. And it's bi-directional, the influence. You influence your twin. Ultimately, their goal is that your twin influences you. And yeah, so I think that's sort of like my introduction, but it sounds lovely. But once you understand that all of this alternative knowing, because the AI would probably be most interested in the kinds of things that the AVA people would know, right? Because they could probably get a lot of other boring academics from other places. There's like, that's kind of a dime a dozen. STEM information, like there's a lot of that floating around, but things that are actually more about a heart space or an intention, that is really valuable if what they're trying to do is build the singularity. So again, thanks and sorry for the noise disruption.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you. So Joseph Gonzalez is going to speak next, and Joseph is has spent 30 years as a software engineer and 10 years before that as an electronic engineer. He's served 13 years as an Army veteran and fought in the Gulf War. He has extensive technological wealth of wisdom working with games development, AI, and the blockchain. And he's going to speak to us today about blockchain tech and particularly digital wallets and how they are a portal for smart environments and the metaverse. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you for having me. Okay. Yeah, everything that Alison was saying. Can you hear me well? By the way, I don't have a microphone, so I have to speak a little bit into the camera mic. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, everything that Alison just said is pretty much exactly how it's happening. I came in discovering most of this. I was aware of how the world operated to some degree because I had been in the military. I had also worked for a Department of Defense contracting company. So I worked on some defense projects as an electronics engineer. And as a game developer, I worked on war games that was partially funded by the military when I was in North Carolina. So I was aware of some of this, but it didn't seem to me to be predatory as what I was beginning to discover when I got into blockchain. I got into blockchain maybe 2 years after the crash, 2 or 3 years after the 2008 crash. Satoshi Nakamoto had come out with the blockchain, with the Bitcoin, and I discovered that it was actually an ingenious invention. But I didn't see its real application yet until the Ethereum blockchain came out, which was comprised of smart contracts. So I looked at smart contracts and I thought, wow, this is a great idea. This is an ingenious product that I can apply to my games as a game developer. That I can introduce this smart contracts application to set up the economy within my gaming environment. Every game has an internal economics. And if you learn blockchain, or smart contracts rather, you realize that smart contracts is just another way of enforcing rules, enforcing contracts. Contracts are rules. You can also think of them as laws. So I was of the mindset that I could create rules within my worlds and have all the players meet certain conditions in order to be able to receive the um, the benefits of the game, either in assets, virtual assets, or monetary rewards in the form of tokens or coins. So it seemed like a great way to perhaps make money. I can also maintain the integrity of the assets, the integrity of the leaderboards, be able to ward off hackers and so forth. So I started learning how to program smart contracts, and I started writing applications, and I started integrating it into my games. As I was writing and designing the actual smart contracts and applying it to an actual scenario within the game world, I started to realize that this could be used in a detrimental way. That this could be used, if in the hands of the wrong actor, could be used to have us comply to rules that we don't agree on. If you were to apply these smart contracts at, say, critical ports, entry and exit access points for resources, and if you don't meet the conditions in order to get to the access ports, such as a store, for example, then you would not be allowed to have access to the goods or services. And so I realized that this was potentially bad if applied to the real world. So that's at that point, that was in 2000, I believe in 2016, 15 or 16, I started warning people that we had to take control of the blockchain, or we could face a dark age, really, literally a dark age, a totalitarian crypto-based or blockchain-based totalitarian authoritarian system. So in the beginning, I was just warning people. But as time was going on, I started, because I was always following the consortiums of the blockchain groups, and I continued as a game developer. And so, and also as a hardware engineer, because I'm an electronics engineer, I kept track of all the Internet of Things development as well. And so I started seeing all the research that was going on in tying the outside world, the physical world, with the virtual world as a game developer, tying the two together, and then moderating the transactions back and forth with blockchain. And then it was at that moment I realized we have a big problem. And so I started warning people more and more. Then I started seeing how the big corporations were wanting to create, the big corporations, they have an interest in their products. So they wanted to monitor all their hardware, including their buildings, their heatings, central air heating costs, other types of costs, their the products that they manufacture, for example, engines. They wanted to be able to set up sensors inside the engine so they can monitor certain types of breakdowns within the engine and prevent it. But in order to do that, they would have to run a virtual scenario, a virtual setting, a virtual world. So more and more, I started seeing corporations setting up virtual worlds. As a game developer, I was getting a lot of job applications so that I could set up virtual worlds for big corporations. So I started seeing that virtual worlds were popping up everywhere for the corporations. And they were going to tie this in with the ledger, with a blockchain. The blockchain is great because it's able to maintain the integrity of the data so that the data cannot be corrupted. That's the big selling point. So, and most corporations have their own version, which is not really decentralized. It's very centralized. So they were going to run this through the blockchain, and use that also as a set of tokens that would be, you might say commoditized, but used by people, whoever needed this particular information to be used for their own benefit. But using this virtual world and the IoT world, the Internet of Technology, and then moderating it through a channel that goes through the blockchain, I realized you and I, as a consumer, in order to have access to any of this, we would also have to be hooked up, just like the machines, so that we could be moderated by the blockchain, which is also controlled by AI. That's another. I've been studying and working with AI for 30 years. So all of this became very alarming, because then at that point you don't need the middleman. Blockchain's big claim to fame is that it doesn't require a middleman. What will fill in a world of automated governance is AI. So if you have transactions going on between the physical and the virtual world, and you have a blockchain that's mediating the channel, acting as a channel, the AI is actually the mediator. And the AI is checking to see if you are meeting the conditions as put into effect in a blockchain smart contract. And if you don't meet that condition, the AI will not let you transact. So this to me was the big alarm. And so what we're seeing now is an increased rolling, an increased ramp up of this, what I call a dystopian future, a technological dystopian enslavement.
Thank you, Joseph. So our next speaker is Deepti Dat. Deepti is in India, of Indian and Canadian American heritage, and she brings her passionate, fierce mama heart to shine a light and untangle and reveal the deceit. She's a wonderful spokeswoman for much that's unfolding in India at this time with the farmers' protests, and she is a long-time film producer, working in the industry to support transformational and change. And Deepti today is going to speak about the informal community. She's going to speak to the hijacking of the informal economy on a local and a global scale. Thank you, Deepti.
Thanks, Isabella. As Joseph was speaking, it made me think about, when we have to do a call to the bank, which I've often had to do over the past few months over an issue that was going on. There was some money that was removed from my bank account. I think I spoke to you about this, Alison, some time back. And I've just been chasing that down. It's been months. And think about making that call where you get taken through that whole cycle. Press 1 if you want to speak with an operator. Press 7 if you want to do this. That's what I think of when I think of AI running the world, is that you're in this perpetual loop, just trying to get through to, can I speak to a human being? Because fundamentally, that's kind of like what we're looking at. It's AI moderated reality, and not up for it. Spending, 15 minutes, half an hour waiting till that jingle rings through and you get to the person, you get to the function that you need. That's how I see AI. And when Joseph was speaking about, you know, sensors being in cars, so this too is what helped me understand the concept. When you think about your engine and each part of your engine having sensors in it that can feed back to an AI mainframe, which then moderates your engine and makes it run a certain way. It's a labyrinth. It's labyrinthian to think about what all, down to the molecule that would then be censored. And that's literally what's happening. What's, as Alison spoke about earlier, it is looking to appropriate human consciousness. It's literally that. They are AI, in order to be its maximum functionality towards the singularity, needs to appropriate human consciousness. And yeah, there are all these, I don't understand technology as well as Joseph and Alison and Judith do. So I come to it from a very different perspective. My understanding of this has been accelerated, of course, by the introduction to the group of people that I've been lucky to be exposed to. I just feel what's happening in India with the farmers. I don't know if you all know about the protests. It's now going on to its 8th month. It is in its 8th month. So hundreds and thousands of people, elders, children, families, men, women, veterans who have fought in, you know, for and defending India. All of them have been in 5 protest encampment sites surrounding the capital of Delhi. Basically asking for the 3 farm bills that the government passed during lockdown in 2020 to be repealed. Because the 3 farm bills basically remove any protection, any government protection for farmers, including that of what's called an MSP, which is the minimum sale price. In addition to that, what these laws do is also remove recourse for the farmers to pursue it through any legal processes, as was the case before the farm laws passed. So that means the minimum sale price at which the farmers could sell their harvest, which is protected by the government, is removed, which opens them up to pretty much anybody, majorly the corporations who would come in and determine at what price they would pick up the harvest, or not at all, in which case it would go to rot and the farmers would lose money or not be able to sell their harvest. Now, if there was a dispute in that situation with a buyer, potentially, they would not have the means to go to court. So the 3 farm laws also remove the entire legal structure, and who you would be moderating with is a body that would be set up specifically to hear that particular case. So there's no one overall body. That's just a brief overview of what the farm laws are and what these people have been fighting for over 8 months. But for me, it has a lot of resonance to the bigger picture, the global picture of what's happening. What the farmers are fighting, to repeal the 3 farm bills, and why they're doing it with the government, against the government, is very resonant to me in the overall fight that all of us are in right now, whether we know it or not. What's happening with the farmers right now is what is planned for all of us. That is what Agenda 21 is. And I'm constantly trying to, impact how integral this fight is that these people have been at for 8 months now. I've often looked at it as, they are the front. They were the front. They're the ones who stood up and drew a line in the sand and said, no, we don't accept this. This will not happen. And this is our right, and we demand it. And they continue to say this today, and honestly, they're bedraggled at this point, because a lot of the harvests couldn't be done because a lot of the families were at the protest sites. They were taking, rounds of turns going back to the village, and other family members would come. It's been 8 months. This is not a community with a whole lot of money or backing or reserves. A lot of their land is also purchased on, micro loans. A lot of the suicides happen because, for instance, a most recent one where a farmer had 12,000 rupees he had to pay back, which is a little, maybe a little more than, or a little less than $100. And the latest suicide because he couldn't do it. He couldn't pay back that 12,000 rupees. So I encourage everyone, no matter where you are, to really look at what's happening in India, to really look at what's happening with the farmers' protests, because that is a very clear example of what will happen to humanity all over the world going forward if Agenda 21 is a success, as it were. Facebook and Google have invested in a company in India, Jio and Reliance. The plan is that the entire food purchase system goes online. It becomes digitized. What this does at the point where someone like me meets this whole plan would be that I would no longer go. I live in a village in Goa, which is on the west coast of India. And everything that we need, we get locally. The ladies who grow, the farmers, the local farmers who grow vegetables, seasonal crops, all happen around us. Within 5-7 miles of us, we can get, most of our daily veggies seasonally. The bread man who comes every morning, a local bakery, all of this is done locally. Now, with the digitization that they're looking to make happen, the plan is to, the Jio and Facebook plan is to move that entire, what we call the informal sector economy, online. So I no longer meet my bread man every morning. I no longer go down the road and pick up my vegetables from the ladies who grow it locally. I would be on WhatsApp to order that. And that's where I meet that system, but that is what is planned all the way along the line, right to the farmers, right to the soil, right? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been in India for quite some time. I'm sure you all must have heard about their forays into the subcontinent here, as well as Africa, the countries in Africa, primarily because the laws are lax in their execution, and they find it easier to use these places as trial balloons, being the global south, as it were. And they face less consequences because it's easier to keep paying off all along the line of corruption, all the way to the government at the highest levels. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have also been very strongly into agriculture. In fact, Bill Gates has won several agricultural awards in India for his work here. The bulk of his work has been pretty much doing what we were talking about earlier in terms of putting sensors into the engines of the cars Well, they've had, you know, demo farms around Punjab and Haryana, which are the big two farming states, which are called the breadbasket of India because of how much they grow. They've had sensors in the soil. They've had sensors in the big storage areas. They've been monitoring the farmers literally to understand the process from seed to table and get that information, just like what we're looking to do with the digital twins and our consciousness. It's all the way. They literally, it is life put onto the blockchain, right? This is literally, we are looking at digitizing life at its most molecular level. And that's what they've been doing with the farming. Those have been trial demo, I forget the projects for lack of a better word right now, but there is a specific word they use. I'm not an activist. I'm a writer, I'm a journalist, I work in media. I've landed up here completely inadvertently because I've just been shocked at each level of what I've found out, at what is there next above it. And through my children, through education, to thinking about what am I going to be leaving them? You know, what is the world that they're going to grow up in and what's going to happen to them as a mother? And I just feel that we've reached the place in the world where we can't quite stand back as spectators anymore. It's reached a point where we do need to make a stand and make choices and be very clear about that, because that's what it's going to take. This is not going to stop. There's Agenda 21, there's Agenda 2030, there's Agenda 2050. It's super, super, super well planned. There's infrastructure in place, like Isabella said when she was introducing this, that, you know, in 1992 in Rio, there were most of the countries on the planet signed up to this plan. It appears on the surface to be improving the world, you know, setting up to make a better world. That's what all the languaging sounds like and looks like. Enough to have, you know, the millennial onwards generation completely tied into this, a lot of them, who believe a decentralized blockchain is the answer to oppressive governments, which when you come to understand is yeah, macabrely funny. You know, it's macabre in its dark humor, because it's the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. It's just a further control mechanism of advanced technology, which some of us don't even understand. And Joseph has spoken about that. You might go to his page and see something that he's written that's called Situational Awareness, which really resonated for me. And something I saw today as well, which said, you know, if you don't know what water is, you're not going to know you're drowning. And that's a lot of what's happening right now. That's a lot of what's going on right now. And it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. It's with COVID, it's the variants, like Alison explained. It's been entirely done on computer modeling. It's been done entirely on modeling. There is no virus as such to speak of, or that's been isolated by the Cox postulates or by the gold standard in science. None of it has. What we're living through is literally a cult phenomenon called scientism, and which is not science. It is like any other religious cult. And today I saw, you know, the latest screaming headline, which I think I shared with you all on the email, which said, Germany discovers the latest new virus, which is, you know, 100 times worse than than the COVID, and no vaccine ready for it right now. And it just, you know, it makes you laugh, it makes you roll your eyes, and you would laugh if it weren't so horrific that they're not going to stop. This is going to continue and continue, and the way that it's, you know, navigated at our level, where it touches populations and demographics, is through, you know, the next virus, the next this, the next booster, the next shot, how you're going to be what I like to call the pharma-colonial technocracy. It is, we've lived through colonialism in India. And if we don't stop what's going on, you're all going to get to experience what colonialism looks like, and an extreme version of it, a very extreme version of it, which is not even run by humans, it's run by AI. So thank you for listening. Not to be alarmist or freaking anyone out or scaring anyone, but I think we're quite there now. I think we're quite there where there's no space anymore to just stand back and kind of be an observer. I think it's come time. We do need to choose sides, and we do need to draw that line in the sand.
Thank you, Dipti. Yes, absolutely. I agree with the time is now. Thank you. And Judith. Judith is a cooperative business developer, and she began her journey with a degree in fine art from the University of Colorado. She is an Army National Guard veteran and was the founder and former owner of award-winning construction company. More recently, after a lifelong career in construction, she began to transition into the non-profit sector. In 2017, she established Florida Cooperative Empowered Economic Development, SEED, and educating and assisting people from cooperatively owned businesses. After entering the non-profit world, she very quickly began to see and decode how impact investing uses public-private partnerships and foundations to maintain poverty and extract wealth from poor communities through the use of non-profits. She is today here going to talk about the takeover of true cooperative governance. Thank you, Judith.
So thank you for letting me speak. And I'm going to speak from two perspectives. And one is from the perspective of a nonprofit that has had a direct experience with impact investment and this circle of commodification of poverty. And then another perspective of how cooperatives, which are for-profit enterprises, are being co-opted. So my journey began thinking that when I started this nonprofit, what we do is business development. We're just a specialized form of business development, and we would look for funding toward local governments or state government, you know, through doing business assistance. But very soon after I had started making the rounds and being noticed, I was approached by a liaison. And she was either it was always very ambiguous if she was from a foundation or an impact group. And they were seeking out very small startup kind of nonprofits, which we were, and they offered us services. So they said, you know, we can help you with your website, which they did, and they did a great job. They wrote nice articles about us to get us known and give us some visibility. And I didn't quite understand the relationship of why this liaison was working with an impact group and a foundation. But then I had learned in 2014, the US IRS had passed a charitable contribution rule that would allow, so in the past, if you're a billionaire, you give away money to charities, and that allows you a tax deduction. So it allows you a tax deduction. and I'm wondering, why are all these Wall Street guys hanging around these foundations, and why was there such a rise of foundations in the last few years? So what they do is they created this donor advised fund, and this fund can sit in perpetuity. That if you want to put your money in a foundation and a DAF, then it would be advised by these financial people, and they don't have to grant the money right away to get their deduction. So I figured out that was sort of the relationship with this liaison. And eventually this liaison kept telling me, you need to apply to this competition. And I'm like, what is that? And I kind of ignored it. And eventually she kept pushing me. So I eventually made the application to get our organization in, and we won. And what they offered was 6 weeks of training to help us develop a 3-minute pitch, and then complete an on-stage event for prize money. So it was something like the Hunger Games for nonprofits. Like, we have to learn a story and break everyone's heart and win a prize. And I thought, that's kind of unrealistic. First off, I found that really insulting. But anyway, I figured I had got into this and I had to stay with it. Well, I had, the event started with a social, and we were invited with the 9 other organizations that were chosen, and to meet with the impact investors, their organization, to learn about what they were doing and why. And they kept saying things like, oh, we want to do more than write a check, and we want to help. And I'm thinking in my mind, rich people don't like poor people. They have no interest in helping us. This just doesn't make sense. And I thought, well, there's another agenda, but they're not going to tell us. So I had invited a friend of mine who also had a nonprofit, and I thought for sure she'd be interested in something like this. And she had, at the social, convinced these investors to let her record them and live stream it on Facebook, on some page she was attached to. And the next morning, Allison had posted, you shouldn't be hanging out with these guys. You should be organizing and writing and getting them out of your city. And I thought, that sounds reasonable. What does she know that I don't? So we had text a little bit. I started looking ahead at her research because I knew there was a connection to what I was involved in. I kind of felt like, oops, I just stepped in a hornet's nest here, but I'm in this for 6 weeks, so I have to go with it. Well, it was at the time, I did attend the classes, but I actually had to do another presentation to our city council on the same day this pitch was scheduled for. So I had asked someone else on our board to put this pitch together for this event. So we had to write this pitch, and the woman who was presenting kept writing about, we had to write about, how does your organization address poverty? How does it close the gap? And she kept writing about how it helps the middle class. And every time we would meet with them, they're like, no, 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 no. You have to write about how it works with poverty. And I thought, well, I know very well how cooperatives really help poverty, but this woman who's pitching isn't going to change her story. And I'm not really interested in winning this competition, because I was concerned it would make me beholden to further engagement with them. So I just let her do her thing. And to no surprise, we didn't win. But what was interesting is the organizations that did win, the winner was a group of that housed single mothers and pregnant mothers. And I'm like, that's what Allison's been saying. And the second and third place, because I had 6 weeks now to look over what Allison was talking about. And the second or third place winner was Reimagining Schools for the 21st Century. It was sort of like this boutique little school where they had open learning environments, kind of like no brick and mortar, because we don't need that anymore. And we're going to go on field trips all day, and we are going to let the kids decide what they want to learn. And if you look at their website, social emotional learning is just written all over it. We are focused on character and healthy living. And I think that's what Allison's been saying. This is exactly right. And this competition had really demonstrated to me what they were really up to, and really reinforced what she was saying. So I was seeing it in sort of like a full living color. So at the time, about a month later, we were part of a grant. We didn't make the application. We were just one player in this grant for a youth farm. And what we were going to do is we would be developing this youth farm into a youth co-op. So about a month after this competition, that grant was won, And we were to form help the kids, train them to be business owners, and it would be help them form a corporation, and it would be youth owned and youth run. Now I was using a model out of Puerto Rico, which is La Liga de Cooperativas, which is a widely recognized model as the best youth co-op in the world. And they actually have youth co-ops in every single school, starting like in 3rd grade. So you see these kids like having board meetings and making their products and selling their stuff and doing accounting. And some of these kids like make $700 to $1,000 a day. So this is a hugely successful program, but it's in the school system. So the impact investors were continuing to meet with me, and the foundation was keenly interested in any group that had a chance to get into the school system or who was in the school system. And that's why they continued to follow us. But eventually I realized like the impact group was that's not safe money. That's not the kind of money I would want to fund this organization with. So I stepped away. But with the foundation, I just sort of stayed with it. They had offered us to, they offered all these small groups, like you can apply for a small grant. And I think that what they were really looking for, they had us attend trainings. We had to go through these intensive 8-hour trainings, and then and every single thing they were training us for was data collection. And I'm thinking, well, I wrote a grant to start a little farmer's market, and what they're asking me to do is over 100 hours of work just so I can facilitate the sale of a tomato to a hungry person in a food desert. Like, this just does not make sense. So because I had been following Allison's work, I began to understand how this is all about data collection. I had one interaction with another foundation prior to that. We had the full staff at our disposal, and the director had come to me. He said, I can't stay, but when you have this conversation, he gets in my face. He said, think data. And I'm like, think data? Like, what do you want data for? How does that feed people? How does that help people? So you think it's all based on what I see. First off, one thing I noted in SVP, when you meet these other organizations, they're predominantly female started. Like, women are the leaders of these things because women want to do good things. We're nurturing, we're caring for others. So really women have to be aware that all these programs that are coming about, they are funded by predatory investors. And, your children, had I gotten a youth co-op into a school, could be part of an impact investment. That's, something that's funded. So you really have to be aware that, these boutique schools, you want to look at who's funding them. And it's almost impossible to get out of, because if you don't play the game, if you don't follow the rules and learn how to collect data, you will not be funded. And I think the older, larger organizations, they know it's a game, and they just relearn the rules, and they just keep getting their cardboard checks, and they're fine. But I see so many smaller nonprofits just excited, thinking they're doing great work and getting all this attention from, like these impact communities. So I'm like, this is wrong. And they don't really understand how they're really being let off the cliff and going to be beholden to money that probably should have come from your local government or your state government. And that I see clearly is they're taking all that funding away. They're not taxing the rich, and that now the rich are saying, well, we'll lend you the money to pay, solve these problems. And then if it works, you'll pay us back. So it's a frightening thing. So now getting a little bit into, I thought, well, what do impact investors want with co-ops? Because I see them around in our Zoom meetings now. Since the lockdowns, we've had a lot more online trainings or online gatherings, and you just see them showing up again and again. And I'm like, well, what do they want? So I keep reading about impact investing in the cooperative world. And to start with, cooperatives are really defined as business models that are one member, one vote. They're member owned and member controlled. And to be a member, like, you're defined as a member because you use that service. So there are like 5 different types of cooperatives, but you have to be a worker at the co-op, you have to be a consumer of that co-op, or you have to be somehow engaged with that co-op. investors don't really want to work at a co-op. Like, that's not their goal. So they can't own stock. They can't own one share of stock. And even if they did, they would only have one vote, compared to a traditional company where if you own 20% of the stock, then your vote carries 20% of the weight. So they can't really control co-ops, which is why they're always kicking the can around, but they haven't figured out how to logistically break into the house. So people had asked me about ESOPs, which are employee stock option plans. And an ESOP is where it's actually a retirement plan. So you work for a big company. Usually these are really large companies of 100 people or more. After a period of time, you acquire so much stock. You do share in the profits, but you do not share in the decision making. You will not be sitting on a board. You'll just be getting a financial benefit. They work very well. Lots of people work for ESOPs and are very happy, like they have great retirement plans. But because it's a retirement plan, it is subject to the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974, the IRS, and the US Department of Labor. So impact investors are flooding into this market because they can control those companies. They can dismantle them, but they haven't really been able to get into the cooperative world. So I feel like they're just toying around saying, hey, co-ops, look, we're throwing all our money into this model. Why don't you get on board? But we haven't got there yet. So as I was doing research, I found this other model I had heard about, and it's called an employee-owned trust. It's been around since 1929, also came out of England. It is where the employees don't directly own the company. The trust is the direct owner of the company, and the trustees operate it for the benefit of the employees who are the trust beneficiary. But there's no rule about what that benefit has to be. That could mean you get a turkey at Christmas time with a Christmas card with $5 in it. There's no real enforcement of what that benefit is. It says the employees may engage in decision making, but there's no enforcement of that. They share the profits with the employees if they're profitable, but there's no rule saying I can't come in as a CEO or a trustee and pay myself $1 million and therefore there's no profits because my salary was too high. The other thing that is really concerning or interesting was you can, so these are largely unregulated instruments. You could put multiple companies into an EOT. And if there are 38 states in the United States that recognize this, I imagine it's recognized in England as well, because that's where it evolved. But if you purchase a business, an investor could, scoop up all of these businesses that have been decimated, pack them into a trust. If I purchase a business in a state that doesn't recognize them, I can put it in a trust that's been established in another state, and you bundle them up kind of like mortgages. So I started to look at policy, and we've had two or three really good pieces of legislation get through in the last 2 or 3 years. And one was cooperatives were not counted in the US economic census. They were bundled up. They were sort of just rolled in with all the other businesses. They haven't been counted for 20 years. And they were just recently reintroduced into this census, where they will be separated so you can see the true economic impact of what they are able to do. There was also the Main Street Employee Ownership Act. So one of the problems with cooperatives is a business will lend to any bank as long as someone who owns 20% or more will directly guarantee that loan. And no one can guarantee a loan in a co-op because there's usually no one that owns 20%. So depending on the number of people and the number of shares, it's almost impossible to do that. So they introduced a bill that said, fix the problem. SBA, you need to start funding and guaranteeing loans for cooperatives. So when I looked at this in the past, I had always looked at cooperatives were being called out for what they were. ESOPs were being called out, but there was this third term I just didn't register until I started reading it again, and that's called employee owned. And I thought, well, technically cooperatives are employee owned, so are ESOPs, but why are they calling this out as a third term? And I thought, this is strange. And I began to see it over and over and over in multiple languages and papers, employee owned. So I thought, okay, what I see is what they're trying to do is like softly rebrand this whole cooperative thing into employee owned. So that was like, well, I'm going to find the legal definition of what they're talking about. What is employee owned? Now, cooperatives are not a threat to capitalism because their banks won't lend to them, so they always have trouble raising money. They're not taught in business schools. There's a lot of policy that works against them. Opportunity zones, they can't support them because anyone who invests in your business needs to take an equity position, and they can't. So there's just so much working against them. And just to give you an idea of policy, in the US, we have like a population of 330 million people. There's only $5.8 million available in grant funding to help lift cooperatives. And, 30% of our food is delivered through some form of a cooperative in the US, which is significant because we produce about 50% of the world's food. So the co-ops we have are very strong. They've been around for over 100 years, and they're just taking care of themselves. But there's almost no funding to support them. And you compare that to Puerto Rico, which I just learned, they have such a strong cooperative policy. They have a $40 million fund for under 3 million people. And that's because they have a policy that requires all the co-ops to pay like a 7% tax into a fund that will support the startups of new cooperatives and cooperative development. So they have really good policy that allows them to grow. It's kind of what's helping them survive, the crisis and the takeover of the colonizers there. But that's just an example. So we don't have this policy. So I think, well, they're not too afraid of us. So I thought, well, like while these impact investing in the co-op world, they're sort of scoping out our property, but they can't break in yet. But they're flooding funds into ESOPs. And now I see like the EOT is maybe the future. So just on a sidebar, there's like 3 ways to develop cooperatives. And one is sort of like just contacting someone like us, and we'll like give you, it's really breaks down to cooperatives are businesses, how you do accounting, how you make decisions, and adhering to like 7 international principles. So you can just go to and someone to get assistance. You can get preferences set aside from your city for contracts. But there's this other system called the anchor system. And there was a model in, I believe it was Cleveland. It's in Ohio. They decided they were going to solve poverty. So they raised $11 million. They got the universities, the hospitals. They said, we're going to create a laundry business, and you're going to give contracts to them, and we're going to put people to work. And in theory, it works very well, but they had a lot of problems. But ultimately, they trained people, and they're like, here, now you own a business with $11 million in debt. Lucky you. Like, you're never going to see any profits. You're just going to get paid minimum wage forever. And then the business has to pay off all this debt. I think it's something like that. But they got on the map, and they became the first like for-profit developer consulting companies. And so they're well known for helping develop co-ops. And I looked at their website, and I see that they said, why would you want to buy into a co-op? And I see that they offer 8 reasons, but all 8 reasons are financial instruments like profit sharing and holiday pay time off, loan programs, 401 retirement plans. So nothing in there is really saying you have any control over this business. So you don't get to sit on the board, and you don't get to make decisions about what you're going to produce, where you're going to produce, how you're going to produce. How are you going to, do good for the community? All you're going to get is a financial benefit. And I think, well, this is like the start of a soft rebranding of cooperatives. Like, they're just convincing you it's a financial thing, and it's not a control thing. This really kind of pushed me into another direction that was quite eye-opening. So I really believe B Corps are designed to replace the nonprofit for impact investors. Because by law, no one can own a nonprofit, and you can't pay distributions. You can't pay like profits, right? So you can pay yourself a big salary, but the impact investors are not interested in me getting a big salary. They want to make money off of this. But what they're doing is the B Corps are now setting up certifications for themselves that measure companies, their entire social and environmental performance. And it becomes like, oh, you've been verified as a certified B Corp, which has no legal enforcement to it. There's also like the B impact assessment, which evaluates how your company operates, your business model, and impacts your workers, your community, your environment, your customers, from the supply chain and inputs, materials, to your charitable giving, to your employee benefits. So they say this has a positive impact on transparency and accountability requirements. And it really commits to consider your shareholders, consider your stakeholder impact for the long-term building into your company's legal structure. So really what I see that language is saying, we're going to get rid of you nonprofits, we're going to the B Corp. Because the B Corp is, if they're certified, it's pretty much saying we are certifiably exploitable. Come to our company, because certifications have no legal force. So I'm like, well, why do you need to be certified? Then I found another certification, a B Corp also formed the Ownership Alliance. And what they're developing is a certification program for companies that claim to be employee owned. Again, we're back to employee owned. We're not talking about cooperatives. We're not talking about ESOPs. We're back to this word employee owned. So they've come up with a certified employee owned certification, which to me just says we're certifiably exploitable, and it's not enforceable. It's not an enforceable legal instrument. No, the IRS doesn't require any of this. But the reason they say they're doing it is it's to source qualified investments and to develop sufficient financial data and infrastructure to support specific types of investment vehicles. Specific types of investment vehicles sound like impact investing, pay for success. These are the kinds of vehicles that they really want to target. And it said a number of organizations are working on these in these areas, and one is Project Equity. And Project Equity is a very trusted source in the cooperative world. And I think, what are you doing in there? Like, it's just like money corrupts on every level. They shouldn't even have a hand in this. But anyway, they say they're evaluating whether some types of matching or aggregating of employee ownership investment opportunities. Now let's go back to the employee trust. You could put 100 companies in a trust. So you have it's like bundling mortgages, and they're going to use standardized coding to help source and incubate companies within the spectrum of employee ownership. So to me, this has pay for success written all over it. And I think one thing I picked up at a conference I had mentioned to Allison before is it was the Democracy Collaborative. They said, well, we envision a future where you're going to own your job the way you own a car. And yeah, and it's like, so now this race to the bottom with this gig economy, they want to make everyone coders and then compete for jobs. If you want stability in your job, you're going to be required to buy your job. And they're going to say it's through this employee ownership, because the IRS does require, if you, if you work for a cooperative, you don't have to join. You don't have to be a member. You can just be a worker and not be an owner. If you want to buy in, you can be a worker and an owner, but you don't have to be both. They are voluntary. But what they're going to do is say, the IRS says, if you're going to buy in, there has to be an economic participation. That's in tax law. So they'll say, well, you have to buy into this company. It's an employee owned. They'll make you work there for a while to see if you're a good fit. And then they'll make you buy your job. And then maybe you'll have some stability. We have been talking a lot. I'm in a national developers group about the unification of cooperative statutes. And I think that's a good thing, because it's in the US, it's state by state. However, it could be bad because maybe they'll water the language down. And I think why they want to do it is they want to put this new term into our statutes about employee ownership and kind of under the umbrella of ESOPs and co-ops, and say, well, we're really doing this for the ESOP co-op movement, but we have this new thing called employee ownership. It's all the same. And also I did find a Bloomberg tax portfolio that was that had analyzed the federal income tax treatment of cooperatives. So what I see in conclusion is nonprofits and developers will be harnessed by funders and foundations to become data collectors. And if you don't, you won't be funded. And there's a rebranding of cooperatives to translate into employee owned. There's a restructuring of employee owned through EOTs as exploitable business models. And this certification process, I just see it as a precursor for future legislation that will leave models very vulnerable. So I think that's what they're trying to do. So with that said, that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you. So there is so many levels at which we could take this, and hopefully we can cover some of those. And I'm wondering if it's helpful to look at the vaccine passports and the certificates that are being proposed as a kind of how that's relates to what we're discussing here.
I had just a couple quick comments to elaborate on what Judith said about looping it back to education. If there's
Sure.
Is that all right?
Yep, sure.
Because I do want to mention, I think she's right about the benefit corporations, the B Corp, and it's this hybrid of for-profit with a pretense at non-public benefit, but it really is a for-profit. And I know this because actually the B Lab, which is funded by Rockefeller, whose hands are deep in all of the public health space too, clearly, and the woman who set it all up was the president of the University of Pennsylvania at the time, which is where I am in Philadelphia. The B Lab, its physical address, is actually about 40 minutes from my house. I actually went to go see the building. And they share space with the Exton Dog Show. It's sort of like nobody on the internet knows that the B Lab shares rental space in this dumpy building with the Exton Dog Show. So, but it's a thing. And so actually when I was looking, this was several years ago, because my framing is education, is that they had a whole set of standards around credentialing specifically for education, Judith, specifically for education in terms of impacts. And so once you understand lifelong learning, that it's not just preschool, because really they want cradle to career, but they were also a huge market in the United States was returning citizens. So people who have been part of the judicial process and the prison industrial complex. So they would reshape both connected to welfare to work reform and retraining obligations around that, and also training obligations around people on parole for learning, but it was predominantly online learning systems. So again, that would be linked to some sort of digital credentialing system, that would be linked to proper behaviors, being a good digital citizen, logging all of that data with the sensors that we know that are part of all of this. But then additionally, because it's online, increasingly, they will have people freelance as teachers. And that's what I was seeing in the public education space was even people who were full-time employed paid teachers would get jobs teaching VIP children in China at night. They would get up in the middle of the night and do one-on-one tutoring through VIP Kid, a gig job in another time zone to supplement their existing salary because it was insufficient. Even retired people who didn't have enough money, they were online tutors, and there were these gig apps where you would then be a tutor to someone, but it's all linked in, and the VIP Kid into like the whole app rating system. I know a VIP Kid, you had apples and they would rate you every day on how many apples you earned that day. And if you didn't, you were at the behest of the child or the family that you were tutoring. And so if you understand, like you peel back the element of, this lovely alternative education model that they're selling you on blockchain, is that really it's a predatory, rating system, the Uber of education, but through this idea of investments in human capital, the benefit corps we're very close to education in the United States, alternative micro school models like alt school, the ones that were connected to Facebook, and that these various technology companies. But like they were always the alternative model schools, right? And so even the micro schools, people who have small private schools, are going to go up against these other like tech-driven micro school models. There's a new model coming that's like stripped down private education. And that's going to be run on blended learning and like one-on-one rating gig tutor kinds of people. But then you will be rated onto your productivity. Like, how much did you move the data for these kids, or for these formerly incarcerated people, or for people on poverty? All of the things where they were rating public school teachers in impossible situations to make children subject to really brutal regimes of online learning that were just soul killing, and then rating the teachers based on their outcomes, based on test scores. Now that's going to spread out to the gig economy. And then instead of your classroom teacher being rated based on the test scores, it's going to be you as an independent operator, a tutor, and what the outcomes are on the people that you tutor. And that's how it will all be tracked on blockchain. It's like their economic benefit. And the thing I forgot to mention is there's this whole layer of UN Sustainable Development Goal 4 is education, but 3 is health. And so there's a health element and a mental health element, so that if you have anxiety or depression, they'll start, I didn't get a chance to talk about social prescribing, but they'll say, oh, you're not doing so well in this, they won't say in this terrible, impossible world, but if you just volunteered a little, or maybe you took a class, or maybe you did a thing, you would be better. And there would be a cost offset to the economy based on something that was developed by Richard Layard, who was like, there's a cost offset for depression, and it being a drag on the economy if people are depressed and they can't be as productive as they should be. And it's all framed as well-being and happiness. So they'll create these structures for education to say, well, you'd all just be happier if you did a little bit of continuing education. And then you become part of this blockchain app-based tutorial gig economy world. So anyway, I just wanted to reinforce what you were saying, Judith, and probably those, we've been seeing a lot of labor organizing for independent contractors. So probably they're setting up and envisioning that all of these independent tutors and teachers will then come into one of these trust type of situations where they don't really have any meaningful control, but maybe they get a turkey, out of it. And then that trust will be a benefit corporation run by Facebook.
An experience with a friend of mine. She's a nurse and she has 4 children. And while her children were homeschooling during the lockdown, one of her teachers asked this child who's 10 years old if she was feeling depressed. And what does a 10-year-old say? Yeah, sure. Like, they want to be compliant, right? Yeah, of course. Okay, yeah, I'm depressed. And they ended up removing the child from her. And they put the child in foster care. Now, I know this woman. She is a very good mother. She's a registered nurse. She takes good care of her children, but all because a child told a teacher maybe she was feeling depressed. And they came and removed that child from her. And then they ordered her to put the child on psychotropic drugs. And this woman is a nurse and said, those are dangerous drugs. I'm not condoning to that. And they wanted to remove her parental rights because she wouldn't medicate and drug her child. And I think this is all from being at home like online schooling. So it's very scary what they can do to you, and very real.
Absolutely. And a 10-year-old is going to be feeling depressed doing online learning. Yeah, there's so many avenues that we can go to, and I think if we just open the floor and allow the conversation that wants to emerge, but I feel like what could some of the elements that could be helpful is to various speakers have touched on the sensors, and the government website here in the UK has recently uploaded a document which is about the augmentation of humanity. So that goes into the Internet of Bodies and the many devices that are being developed and have been funded for many years now to kind of integrate the internet with our bodies, if we should so choose to go down that avenue. So it seems very far out and sci-fi, and as if it's new to people, it's really far out. But it is there. You can look at the government website, you can look at the World Economic Forum, and then they talk about the future of humanity being merged with technology and us becoming superhumans. So I'm wondering about yeah, touching on the vaccine passport, touching on the sensors, and the level of thoughts around how do we enact our, for me, I'm clear, I do not consent, and as I see this kind of rolling in, I'm not playing along, but like how far, it feels like it's like a web that's seeking to kind of get a stranglehold on humanity, and where's the edge of, like, obviously there's a lot of individuals that are increasingly seeing what's going on and not complying, but what's the balance point? What's needed for this to crumble? Or are we looking at a kind of split and a divide within culture? Just ideas around all these things, but welcoming the conversation that wants to emerge.
This is also something that came out of a conversation today where I think, and correct me here or add to it if you guys feel so, but I feel a lot of the programs and kind of headlines and sensationalism we see thrown at us, I think they're test runs. I think they're trying it out. I don't think that the capability has reached such a point. But like with the vaccine passport, I think I think it's to test us to see how much we'll accept. Just like right from the beginning, there were rules and regulations that were put out, which I think were compliance metrics. I think they were to see what would work and what would not. So like the masks, which had an overwhelming success globally, as we saw, and many other things thereafter, the 6 feet apart, the stay at home, the curfews, the nonstop things that we dealt with. And I don't know how far the vaccine passports have gotten in a lot of places, but Joseph, do you think that this is in a way how it's tested? Allison too, anyone's open to consider this, but I feel a lot of these things are thrown out there. They seem really big and scary and irreversible, but do you think that, like the masks and the other things we referenced, they may be just compliance metrics just to see what we do with it and then adjust, reframe, reform, and keep moving the agenda?
If you allow me to speak, I think because of my military history, and Judith was in the military herself also, usually as a combat veteran and also as a game developer, it extends there as well. Usually you'll do trial runs. You'll do, in some cases, for lack of a better word, a simulation or a test in order to be able to fine-tune the actual operation. Because if you look at this as a military operation, you first put out your test run. You find out what what are the soft targets that you can capitalize on. You find out during the test run what boundaries or barriers you may encounter, what support systems you may need to reinforce whatever it is you're doing, what security elements you might have to introduce into the forward advance. So in many ways, I've seen what's been going on as, in some cases, as a test run, like for example, when I forgot the name, one of you can probably help me. When they had the hack of the meat plants, and then later on they also had a hack of, what was it also? It was another hack of a different industry, and which was a way of learning, in my mind, a way of doing a test run to see what fine tuning might have to be put in play in the event that they come with something bigger on a wider scale. So as a game developer also, as a software developer, I also do the same thing. I do unit testing, what's called unit testing. I run scenarios, I run simulations, see what breaks, see what works, do testing on the outside barriers, parameters, the boundaries, and anything that breaks, then I go ahead and we start what's called the debugging phase, because that's usually your part of your beta testing. So I feel like a lot of what we're seeing is beta testing, and if that's the case, I'm really worried about what's coming in afterwards. I don't know if that answers your question. Is that the question you were answering?
Yes, that is what I was trying to see, is that if the thoughts that the conversation I was having today, it did seem like that. The friend that I was speaking to had, this is exactly what she was proposing as well, is that a lot of this is possibly not real. It's just the ideas thrown out to see what the response will be and what the compliance would be. And then it's adjusted and moved forward.
And one thing that's widely practiced is called the Agile Methodology. The Agile Methodology is used in the program world, but it's also used in the business world, and it's applied in the military as well. It's the ability to take a plan, execute the plan, and modify it based on metrics, based on feedback, and modify the plan in real time. So that's called an agile methodology, as opposed to a waterfall methodology, whereas you write the entire plan and then you execute the entire plan to completion. Whereas in agile, you have your scrum meetings and your stand-ups inside a business to go over each week, at the end of the week, to go over what needed to be done, user feedback from your customers to be able to make whatever changes need to be made to the product. That's called agile development, and that's applied in real-time development and updating of products that are out there. You take the product that is bare minimum, put it out there, and then upgrade it in real time. And that's called agile development. So I see that a lot.
So before all of the health stuff happened over the past year and a half, I had been looking at blockchain and digital identity, or they sometimes call it self-sovereign identity, within the context of education for about, well, at least since 2016, both in being used as a model for education transcripts. So ultimately this idea, they start with something that is familiar to people, this idea that you have a transcript from high school or a transcript from higher education that qualifies you for a job. And for the lifelong learning that you will never be done, it's just, you just collect badges and skill points to try to, run the gauntlet of AI to try to get a gig. That's sort of how they're imagining it. So I was looking very closely at the digital identity, both from education and from so-called humanitarian aid, because actually communities of displaced people, particularly the Syrian refugees, were a test bed for a lot of what is coming with digital payment credit systems, biometric identity tracking, smart housing, certain educational technology-based schooling. So that was being run by the global financiers through the aid community for quite some time before this even hit as a health element, right? And so the the medical passports that are related to showing, a series of immunizations, that you're up to date, is really an extension of having your medical records on as electronic records, which here in the United States was connected to the Affordable Care Act. And Zeke Emanuel, who is supposedly a bioethicist, although he's based at Penn, he's connected to Obama and impact investors. And he's, someone who says like, oh, really, you should only live to be in your early 70s and then, just be done with you. Like, he's very problematic. And his brothers are also problems, Ram and Ari Emanuel. But so this idea of a blockchain-based electronic health record has always been floating around. And then you've got an educational transcript on blockchain floating around this model. And then you have another model out there that is your food access and your a dependency because you've been dispossessed of your homeland from economic or war circumstances. You've got all of these different models of digital identity floating. And I think when Joseph speaks about the agile development, what the vast majority of people in sort of who are countering the mainstream narrative don't fully understand that it's not simply about health. That is a significant area because they really do want the biosensor data and they really do want us to use our life force to power the workings of this through piezoelectric energy harvest. And so health is definitely a significant part, but really the frame is more this shift to a digital identity on blockchain and your relationship to the state, whatever state that is, your government as a digital citizen. And so my fear is that what are the pilots? Well, certainly they have pilots that are related to what they frame as the pandemic, but at least in the US, we have certain parts of the country that are identified as havens for people who are trying to seek an alternate to having a medical passport. But we know in particular, Florida and Texas, that those particular states are deeply involved in the other parts of the agenda. So, you might escape the medical passport, but your kids are gonna get an electronic blockchain transcript, or you're gonna get a digital driver's license. And so until we can sort of surface this larger program of like harnessing our life force through these digital twinning mechanisms that are then fed into financial markets and military planning purposes, and ultimately AI and the singularity, we're just bogged down in COVID, and we're not really we're just nibbling bits, poking at different parts of the elephant. But there are very few people who have this broader framing and who understand, they understand the immediate harm of a health passport to their daily life. But I would say the vast majority of people are not yet in a position to pivot from a medical passport on blockchain with biometrics to a digital citizenship of the kind that they have in Estonia right now. But that is definitely what is in process, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, I mean, what about how do we surface that, Alison? I know that's what you're doing, and that's what we're all doing.
I really need to get my glossary done. I make little infographics. It's just very big. And it keeps, the past, month I've been diving into nanotechnology, which is something that clearly has been well underway for 25 years at least, that I'd never really, maybe I'd heard the word nanotechnology, but to have a grasp that something that this molecular engineering would have such profound potential consequences for life on Earth. Joseph and I were just spending some time today talking about like brain structures and quantum computing and graphene nanotubes, and that they're trying to build quantum computers based on like structures in people's brains. It just keeps getting larger and larger. And so it's this hyper object, right? And part of it, I want to throw open, because I think we come out of this, like on the one hand, I go into all of these details and that makes me feel a little more in control if I can like name it or label it or understand it as best I can. For a lot of people, that's super overwhelming. And so I feel like coming at this from a place of, like I call it sacred work, deep understanding like story, right? The importance of compelling narrative and a spiritual narrative. And, Judith, you came in with the bringing of your own personal experience, your own personal story. I think that is the challenge, is how do we use our humanity and our access to art and music and self-expression and drawing on these older roots that are connected to older knowledges, to talk about it in a way that we can shift the narrative that has everyone so broken apart, and still empower people in the knowledge that we don't think that all of their plans are all going to come together. It seems very overwhelming, but when you look at all the different things that have to work at scale, it's quite a stretch that they're going to be able to do it all at scale without a problem, right? And clearly we shouldn't discount that, because there's a considerable harm that could happen along the way. But I don't think it's all going to go as they say. But we have to tell, I keep saying we have to tell the better story. I'm not a great storyteller, but I bet there are people in your circles who are great storytellers. And that's where I think it goes, is how do we tell that story in all the beautiful ways that we can articulate in our humanity at a global level. I keep saying it's a global peace movement, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I want to add to that is, as a former military person, combat vet, and I've had discussions with Allison before about this. The only way to combat this is literally through love. It's the only way. There's no way we're going to be able to combat this with violence. As much as people say that violence is necessary, I'm trying to answer your question. Like, what do we do? And the military and the police state is just too big and too powerful. I've seen firsthand in front of me what the military can do. What an Air Force, a Navy, an Army, with tanks and artillery and infantry units, special forces units. It's you cannot beat this. And if you use any form of violence, you only give them the green light to counter, to react, 100 times fold. So you can't. The only way, in my mind, this is my personal belief, is to get the mothers of the world, get all the mothers of the world angry and telling the governments and the corporations to back off, to leave their children alone. We have to somehow get the mothers' love for their children. Somehow your mothers, you are all mothers, remind you and the mothers of the world what it was like raising a child, giving birth to a child, feeding your child, taking your child to the doctor when they were sick. We have to bring this back. And we have to wake up the women. The guys will follow the woman. The children who are serving in the military, they will not attack their mother. They will not attack their grandmother. Okay? You've got to get the women up. The guys will be right there behind you. They'll fight with you. No violence, just show the love. And I think that's the way to do it. That's what I think. We don't need violence. I've seen what they can do. They're brutal. But you can do it this way. When I was in the war, a lady brought her child to me, and I almost cried. She thanked me. And that was a big connection. She brought her child and said, thank you. So a mother's love, I think, is a powerful thing. You have to excuse me, I'm sorry here. I didn't expect this.
Beautiful.
I think information, remember what I said, situational awareness. We have to spread this out, and we have to wake everybody up, especially the mothers. Otherwise, we lose.
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you, Joseph.
We really appreciate your perspective. No, it's important. All of it, all your whole life perspective and all your knowledge. It's valued.
Yeah.
Nobody wants this. If they knew, nobody wants this. If they actually knew what it was, they wouldn't want it.
The way I look at this is, I see an expansion. I've talked to you about this before. It's an expanding power. And they've been doing this for a long time, killing people, innocent people. I was in a war that never should have been, that never should have happened. And these people that are creating these wars are the same people who are running this entire COVID operation. They have no heart. I saw the orders we were given. When I was there, they told us to kill all the Iraqis, 3/4 of their army, don't let them escape. And it was a massacre. I saw them roll over. The soldiers, the Iraqi soldiers that were in the trenches, bulldozed alive. This was not, it wasn't necessary. That was not what I went into the army for, not for murder, because that was murder. And it bothered me for a long time. It's the same people who are running this. So I'm telling you, we have to rise up and push back against these people. They have no power if they don't have our hearts and mind. They are always trying to convince us. They spend billions and billions of dollars in advertisement and media to lie to us, to win our hearts and mind so that they get the okay to invade whoever they want to invade, including your body now. We need to change, flip it, and win the hearts and minds of the parents, and then tell them what is happening, and they lose control. They lose power. That is the only way we're going to win this. We have to change the script. We have to flip it and win the hearts and mind. Hearts, love, the hearts and the mind. That's how you win. That's how you win.
Yeah.
They're expanding their power. It's an empire. And when they say they're measuring your happiness, just like in game development, as a game developer, do you know that happiness is an important metric in a game, the creation of a game? Measuring the happiness is an indicator of whether you'll be a good producer, producing goods and services and weapons. That's all they're really measuring. They're not really interested in your happiness. It's just a metric to realize if activities within a city or a country is adverse or oppositional activities is at a minimum. If people go into stadiums, sporting events, to music, movies, and all that, they measure it like that. That's how you measure it. That's how you measure happiness. And if people go into these events, then there's very little rioting and disruption, and people are working. So they use that, all this, as a metric to indirectly measure the output productivity of their empire, of their expansion. That's it. We have to show what true happiness is, which is not happiness so that we can make products for corporations.
It's interesting at Penn, which I think is like possibly the We say Ben Franklin opened the gates of hell in Philadelphia with Prometheus, and Penn is his university, right? But one of the key players in both the human capital space is this woman, Angela Duckworth, and she's the grit. She's this grit, social, positive psychology, but she talks about grit. But she works with Jim Heckman, which is the human capital bond equation guy, and he's at University of Chicago. But one of her other colleagues is Martin Seligman. And Martin Seligman is part of this World Wellbeing Project, Joseph, and they take all of the social media data analytics to manage quote unquote well-being. And he also has a whole other program called Authentic Happiness. And he does all sorts of work with the veteran, the VA, and around post-traumatic stress disorder. But I think it's very compelling that they have this designation that is authentic happiness. And he actually worked very closely with KIPP, which is this Knowledge is Power charter school franchise. Those people came out of Penn too, and it's very brutal and abusive to the children. They turn the children into robots, literally. Very, they have to sign with their hands. They're not allowed to talk. They have to be very rigid with their bodies. It's very punitive. You have to like earn your right to have a desk. It's a horror show. And he's an advisor to that program. Again, all with connections to Penn and the human capital bonds. But his work in learned helplessness was used in the Guantanamo torture protocols. So like it's this inversion where they talk about happiness and they talk about metrics, but it's just that they're flipping it all. I mean, it's grotesque. And I just want to say on the education side, the charter, like for us, these charter schools, I think are like in the UK, the academies, but this absolute return on kids, this ARC is run by a giant hedge fund. And what I was finding in following the privatization of our schools is that they went over to the UK, and it was specifically the hedge funds that were behind it. And within ARC, they were doing certification credentials for social workers in the schools, Judith. So when you go back to that issue of a child making an off the hand comment and then being whisked away into foster care, you can imagine what happens when hedge fund companies start running alternative schools, and they have sort of alternative credentialed social workers who need jobs, right? Because the jobs are all being taken away. So at risk of their job, not that necessarily these individual social workers would want to pursue the work that they're asked to do, but essentially if they don't comply with the programs, they'll be out of their job. And so it's just, it's a brutal regime all the way down, but a lot of it backs up to Penn where I'm at. So that's why I have the responsibility to tell people.
I wonder if it's a good time that we can open up the conversation for our members and our audience here tonight. If there are questions that you'd like to ask into the pot here. And just to remind you, if you'd like to remain non-visible, to make sure that your video is switched off and to unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you very much, all of you. Thanks, Isabella, for convening this. It's great to be in a room with Alison, Anton, Joe, Deputy Dat, all of which I follow on Facebook very closely. And I was going to actually send a message to Joe and Alison, because your understanding of the whole blockchain, digital futures, human capital, everything is, you've done a phenomenal amount of work, and I'm gradually getting something of a handle on it. And as you said earlier, when are we going to stop talking about virus, vaccine, and masks and start talking about synthetic biology, nanoelectronics, blockchain, medicals, and that? And what's interesting about that for me is that the programming, the the Agile Methodology. I think it's been just so fantastically. I think even the governments are awed by how successful it's been, and so with the effect that it's virtually impossible to have a conversation with people about virus, vaccines, and masks because it's so polarized. And someone I heard suggested that maybe there's a deep level of NLP programming or hypnosis through the television that has done this, because it's just so baffling, especially as the vaccine injuries and the vaccine, you've got the Olympics there with all these double vaccinated athletes dropping out because they've gone down with COVID, where they're not effective and they're not safe. And that's, it's kind of obvious, but maybe just the programming is however, the subject of the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and all this thing, which is this horrible agenda, is kind of a subject that people they're sort of interested in technological futures and developments and everything. So it's not off limits. I can have a conversation with my brothers it's pointless to talk about vaccines with them. So I was wondering if it's not me being lazy, whether between the two of you, you could put together a sort of idiot's guide to blockchain and all of it, the key things, and also the fact that they are, I think you said, Alison, that adults aren't such good test beds because our programs are already in there, but it's the children and the infants at primary school that they're focusing on, and that is where the mothers. Certainly, we could have I could have a conversation with my nieces who are mothers to my great nephews and nieces. It's a conversation that could open up, and that if only people realize that it's the same people murdering Iraqis or any number of genocidal atrocity, the same is a tiny few people in charge of this, and why and how is that's the question. And that's if that level of transparency can grow, that's the only hope other than a divine intervention in my thing, because it just looks like they've got every exit covered. They've thought of every eventuality and they will stamp on anything. So I wondered if that would be a thing that you could do, put together I don't know, a half hour, like they have on the BBC, your guide to the Great Reset, your guide to vaccine, where they have little kiddies cartoons and treat us or infantilize us, whether that's possible. Oh, and I wanted to ask, because I presume I wanted you to define the singularity as you put it. I presume that's their holy grail, their end points, their singularity of all. So I wonder if you could just explain to me what you mean by that. And thank you everybody for being here. Thanks.
Is this the question is for me or for Alison?
Both of you, really, as you work very closely together, and you seem to have a real understanding of the intricacies of blockchain and the digital.
No, okay, Alison, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll just say I actually have on the back burner like a short article that I was working on for blockchain like just an abbreviated one, but my lens, because I come at it from a policy side than a technical side, is different from what Joseph would offer. And someone had like lots of edits and comments. So I kind of just set it aside and I never got back to it, but I could pull it back out. But I think I would want to make sure, like, because we each have a different lens on it, like to interface Joseph's knowledge and my knowledge. And he's probably the better one to talk about the singularity. So I'll pass it on to you, Joseph.
Let me see if am I on? Okay. As far as the blockchain, I think I probably could put something. I had done it once before, and I posted, but I've realized that people have other questions, and not so much trying to explain what blockchain is, but what are the cons? What people are not aware of mostly is not so much in theory how it works, because in theory it sounds great. That's what drew me in. It's the cons. It's how it can be worked around and how it doesn't work, and how it can be co-opted, and how it has, and how it has been hijacked and reprogrammed in front of your eyes, turned into something else. So yeah, there's a big list of things that are really bad with blockchain. I could go on, and the smart contract is even worse. So yeah, I'd love to do that. Allison, just give me your list and I'll see if I can add. Okay. As far as the singularity, that's it depends who you ask. If you ask Gertzel, he's working on something for the commercial sector, the Singularity Net, and the Singularity Net, as it stands now, or is proposed to become, is a collection of what's called vertical AIs. A vertical AI is like a silo. It's specialized, an aggregation of specialized AIs, like an AI for facial recognition, an AI for voice recognition, an AI for print recognition, character recognition, optical character recognition, just, an AI for gait movement, for gestures, feelings, whatever. There's all types, anything that requires recognizing a pattern, any kind of pattern, whether it's a weather pattern, or ocean patterns, or anything that entails a pattern, that's where AI comes in. So the Singularity Net is a collection of unique AIs written for that particular application. And if you on the outside, you don't look at the individual AIs, you look at the whole thing as just one big giant AI from the outside. And when you make a request, let's say you're a store and a customer walks in and you want to do a facial recognition on him or her to see if it's this person is allowed to enter the premises, because we have new laws that allow only the vaccinated to walk in. That request will be sent to like, for example, I'm not saying the Singularity Net, but yes, you could send it to the Singularity Net, who, if with the connection, right, Allison, with the connection, like with Cardano, what is it, Cardano? Cardano, I think it's Cardano. A big giant database, blockchain database. They could go, the AI, the little verticals will communicate with each other, transact with each other using crypto. They pay each other. And when the solution is found, using also the database, the blockchain, it will send the result out to the store, and then the store, there will be a crypto transaction between the two. So AI, the Singularity, is the goal of the Singularity is to reach what's called AGI, the artificial general intelligence, where the AI can do anything that a human can do, anything. If a human can do it, the AI will do it, but only much faster. There's no task that it cannot do than any human and every human on Earth. Only it does it faster. When the AI reaches that point, then there will be an intelligence explosion, because the AI will start modifying itself and rewriting itself and leave us, in theory, leave us behind, and we'll be like the equivalent of ants compared to the AI. So, but we haven't reached that yet. I hope not. I don't think we have. So, but what Goetzel at Singularity Net, what he's creating, the SingularityNet.org or com or whatever it is, he's created a collection of all the AIs. And even I myself, as a programmer, if I have an AI algorithm, I can submit it. And every time that service gets used anywhere in the world, I get paid crypto. Everybody who developed their own unique AI, it's a collection of AI that's created by everybody in the world. Bunch of kids. And they submit it there. It runs as a network with the blockchain, smart contracts, by the way, Ethereum. And it transacts. You ask for an AI, it gives you a response. So for you on the outside, it looks like just one big giant AI that knows everything. And maybe that's the way they're going to design the AI. But if it ever reaches a true AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is, by the way, the name of the cryptocurrency that the Singularity Net uses. They call it the AGI token. If it ever reaches that, then we're in trouble. But I think they would have to get into quantum. That's where the microtubules, Allison, we need to talk more about those microtubules. The microtubules might be the key. The graphene microtubules, according to the research paper I've been reading, if you can roll them up and turn them into qubits, into a quantum computer, tens of thousands of qubits long, entangled, which would be more powerful than all the computers on the planet, and be able to solve any solution instantaneously. So that would be a big problem. So, but and potentially could wake up to consciousness, because that is how our neurons work. Our neurons have microtubules, and potentially, according to, I was telling you, Roger Penrose, there's a theory that quantum computing goes on inside the microtubules of your brain cells. So anyway, there's a lot. I mean, I don't know what more to say. Did I answer the question about the artificial intelligence, the singularity?
Can I chime in just with one thing that rides on the decentralization? And I guess that's one thing of, like, not strictly blockchain, but if you look at the military framing, like, they're anticipating a future of war, like beyond the information warfare, is sort of asymmetrical and decentralized. And so I think as we try to strategize about that, like, it's not like large, centralized military forces at small subunits. And so I often have people say, like, what's the answer, Allison? And I'm like, well, I mean, I think part of it is we need to figure out what is the storyline that we're framing, which is a story of love or peace or, natural life. And then once we have these frameworks, it's like you figure out how that fits where you are. Because we need a leaderless movement. We do not need movements with small numbers of leaders that can be picked up and co-opted. We need to have very clear values and models that people can look at and sort of imagine, like, oh, this feels right to me. Like, they don't have to necessarily make it up out of the thin air. But I think that's the approach, is this, just like Singularity Net is pulling on all these different siloed AIs, is like, there are many different potential solutions, and that we need, if the idea is like a morphic field adjustment, like figure out what fits our overall values where you are. Like, again, I say it's sacred work, and I'm not here to say, okay, there are some people who might say, oh, it's only my faith practice that's the right one, everybody's got to join mine, and everybody else, no. In my frame is this is sacred work, and whatever is that which is sacred to you and your space and your cultural practice, that is the thing. So make it that way in a decentralized way, rather than projecting out onto other people to come and tell you how to do the thing. The empowerment is like the quantum consciousness that we all have in us, if we can get clear enough to tap into it.
Yeah, can I add to that, Allison? As far as like for the military is concerned, we already, well, not we, I sometimes project myself back in the military. I'm not in the military anymore. But as far as the Army is concerned, right? And well, the US military and most militaries around the world, I don't know about the other militaries, but especially the US Army, they already operate in a decentralized way. And I think I may have explained it once before, where it's kind of leaderless. It does get its command from up top, and it does come down in a hierarchy. But at each level, there is a level of intent that is given, that is handed down with certain granularity. Like, at the very top, it's very generic command. There's nothing specific. But everybody, the people immediately below, understand what that intent is. And then down below that is the next level of intent. Everybody below that knows how to carry out, and so forth. So if you take any branch, think of it as a branch again, if you take any branch away and leave only the bottom, again, graph theory, and these are the leaves, right? The nodes at the bottom. If you leave these guys on the bottom, these are the fighting soldiers, right? They know what to do. You take out the platoon leader, still knows what to do. You take out the communication lines, still knows what to do, because the general intent was given. So what I try to tell people is that you have to determine what are the priorities and what is the common intent. What is the intent you're trying to attain, and then figure out a solution, your main solution, find out a solution that helps you to achieve that intent. Now, the one danger that we have is that because our military is comprised mainly of humans, we can appeal to their senses, we can appeal to their hearts and minds, but once it becomes automated, we're in trouble, because an automated machine will have no apprehension whatsoever in shooting down a group of women and children. Whereas humans, men, will have a lot of trouble shooting innocent women and children. Okay? So we still have this level of humanity left, and we have to work with it quickly, because they're trying to automate our entire military force. So right now, the key is love, while we still have it, while we are still human, while we still have a biological life, because once that's taken out of the control mechanism, the control hierarchy, we're in trouble.
It looks like we're up against something pretty big, and like Joseph said, from a military perspective, because this is an entirely military exercise, as has become very abundantly clear all throughout with everybody's work. So, and 1,000% in agreement that this is women's work. It's us at the front lines, I mean, of what the military description of it is. But there's also another very important sensibility around why the feminine. So here in India, for us, I come from a system that's called the Sanatan Dharma. Predates Hinduism, predates religion, predates. It's a system of living, which is observation-based conclusions, right? The feminine is the navigator of the material realm. The feminine is equipped and enabled and built, designed, if you will, to navigate this flux. We've been given the sensibilities, the tools, the internal prompts to be able to handle this realm. The material realm belongs to the feminine. And the etheric realm, the realm of thought, the mind, belongs to the masculine. And I'm speaking about archetypes, not necessarily specifically men and women, but it applies overall as well. And I think this ties in a lot to why the feminine has been quite under attack for a while, as has the masculine, of course, to be, you know, discredited, removed. It is our work. It is the work of the feminine to navigate this flux. And yes, it is a bunch of scrappy moms up against AI that it looks like. And Joseph's very profound talk to that, to the call for women to come up, for women to come and stand up against this. That's what's going on this material level in which we all live our reality, as it were, in this embodiment. There's a much higher reality at work as well. There are multiple, you know, dimensions that are simultaneously at work. And there is a much higher one which has been spoken to by every single indigenous culture anywhere in the world, be it here, be it the Americas, be it Africa, be it Australia, anywhere, Gaelic, all the European ancient pagan systems. Every one of them speaks to these times, that this time will come. And this is the framing this has been my framing throughout everything I've been realizing has happened in the last 2 years. This has been my framing, because every single one of them speak to these times and say, you know, this time is going to come in our world, in our evolution, where in the evolution of consciousness of the Most High, of which we are all each a part, like the waves are of the ocean. All of this we know. You may have heard of this before as well. They don't win. Sorry for the spoiler. They don't win. They don't get to win. And they've been trying this for a very long time. This energy that you may have heard named Wetiko in some instances. Its job is to keep trying to do this, as our job is to keep telling it to fuck off and get out of here. It's been trying to do this for 13,000 years, as we know, recorded history, and it's been losing every time. So like I said, spoiler alert, it doesn't win. Not this time either. It doesn't. But we're going to have to go through what we're going to have to go through. And it's just the beginning. These are just the starting steps. The gift from this is what grows us. This is what brings us to the next evolution of our consciousness. And the only thing that ever does that is discomfort. You know, a comfortable life where nothing ever happened and we were all happy and swimming in rivers and having a great time. Yeah, This is just what I wanted to say. Spoiler alert. They don't win this time either. They don't do it.
Cliff promises there's a great cookout in the Valley of Love after we walk through the zombie apocalypse.
Yes.
He promised.
Exactly. But that's the key. You got to walk through the zombie apocalypse to get there, because if you didn't, you wouldn't see it there, right? It's that classic tale that if there was only light, you wouldn't know it to be light. If there was, just that whole, again, the water analogy too, is that if you don't know what water is, you're not going to know you're drowning. And yes, we do have to walk through that valley to reach the other side, but that we will is assured.
He also says if there's a basement, we go down to the basement with friends, and then we build a blanket fort of love in the middle of it. So even if there is a zombie down in the basement, like find some friends, and some blankets and some boxes and some snacks, and set up a blanket fort of love in the middle of it. Like we can still do that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because the truth is, the zombie is the parts of you that you didn't love and rejected, manifesting as the whole to come to show you. Really, everything that's happening, that is what it is. So I think there's a lot of reason to have hope and faith.
We need Allison and Dickie. What we need is like a full spectrum love.
Yeah.
As opposed to full spectrum domination.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said earlier, Joseph, about, that to go up against it with violence isn't going to work, because you can't go up against it on its own territory, on its own operational system. Yeah. So the farmers, the farm leadership, the union leadership said exactly this from the word go, from the moment they started. And again, I say, I encourage everyone to really look at what's happening there and see what they've been doing and what they continue to do on a daily basis. They said this from the word go. They said, if we use any violence, like this is a non-violent, peaceful protest. It's a satyagraha. It's a peaceful protest. They absolutely will not tolerate violence from anyone. You may have even seen some footage where the police come in, where the ruling party sent some goons into one of the encampments in Delhi and brutally beat some of the people. It was horrific to watch. None of them responded. Because there is a internal commitment from everyone at the protest that we will not resort to violence under any circumstances. And that's how they've been able to last as long as they have to this day. So there's another lesson to take from that also, is internal or external. I've not been able to match up to that, honorable ideal by any means. I get violently angry and furious and raging, and I've been known to knock a punch or two here and there. But to achieve that ideal, that's it. That would be the ultimate for each one of us, to self-realize in that way where, you're oriented and only coming from that love. Yes, it would be the way. For myself as well. I mean, I include myself in the learning to get there.
Yeah. Full spectrum love. Yeah, I feel that the journey for me of non-compliance with this journey, and meeting that, it's like non-compliance on lots of levels, but there's also the non-compliance to fear, and to really deeply rooting myself really rooting myself in my connection with source and my knowledge that I chose to come here for this time, and that they do not win. You know, whatever it's going to look like, whatever we face, that they will not win, and they cannot win because they don't have the heart. You know, they don't have the heart, and they don't have that connection. And yes, they have a lot of power, and yes, if we tune into what they're doing, it's deeply disturbing, and it's scary and all of that. But they don't have the heart, and they don't have the soul and the spirit, and that is our strength. That is what we are, you know. And so, yeah, I root myself there, and I encourage us all. I think it's really important to see what's happening, because I feel like when we can see it, we can make informed choices, and we have more agency to respond. And Joseph, it's just so beautiful to receive your heart, you know, as a man, as a father, and as a brother. And I agree. I see a lot of mothers, you know, and I do see the strength in the mothers, and I see a very wide community of mothers, and I feel to grow and gather that strength together. And I also really appreciate the fathers and the men that are standing with us and gathering with us. And I feel we need the men and the fathers to stand with us, and we can really tip the scales, you know. And I'm just curious about the tipping of the scales. You know, I feel excited about it. I'm like, what does it take? You know, like, and do we just need to each focus on like just one person, you know, just one woman or one man who's close to us in our life, and, you know, and just tip that one scale, and you know, and who can they tip, you know, because we each have such an influence on each other, don't we? And I can really feel, sometimes I feel like in my wider community. Yeah. So in my community, I live in an area that's very alternative. So there's a lot of green activists, and originally I've been here for 15 years now. So obviously my understanding of what the area that I live in is different now than it was. But what is true is that there's a lot of very creative, very heart-centered individuals who very deeply care about our environment and about life, but have not seen through the green washing and the hijacking of the green movement. So a lot are very reluctant to see this side of what's actually being played out, and the hijacking, and so very blind to this. And so, yeah, there's and when you have certain players come forward and, you know, starting to having conversations, and there's this feeling of like, wow, what if that person kind of switched? What effect might that have in the community? And, you know, that's the game we're in, I think, you know, and it's just one person at a time.
Isabella, is it okay if I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So, well, thank you, everybody. I feel like I'm understanding so much more than what I did about blockchain, and my question is to do with cryptos and cryptocurrencies in the light of all of this. I got into crypto earlier this year via a friend of mine he's been looking into it for a while, and so I know a certain amount about the blockchain and its potential in our dystopian future that seems to be being planned for us. But I've just not been exactly clear about how crypto really relates to this. I've been researching it for a while and came across the crypto vigilante, who's the kind of key person behind that is Jeff Berwick. Although there's others involved, he's not the only one, and was really attracted by the decentralized aspect of it. And it seemed like it was a real alternative to fiat money, and which is something that was really appealing and interesting to me, as a decentralized form of actual sound money, and offering, people, sort of normal people, if you like, a way out of the whole sort of 9-to-5 grind of having to earn money to survive, the potential to earn money and create wealth in a way that was completely separate and out of the system of the banks and money and sort of finance as we know it. And also sort of within that became interested in the privacy coins, because of again the decentralized aspect and keeping and having that option to keep our affairs completely private and out of the system. And the other aspect to this is was my wife, who doesn't know so much about the crypto but was intuitively really skeptical about it because of the research that she's done into everything that's going on, Agenda 2030 and the dark side of tech and AI, etc. And so in essence, so that kind of fleshes it all out. But in essence, the question is, how do cryptos really relate to the blockchain? Are they kind of inextricably linked with each other, or not? I'd kind of imagine that somehow cryptos could kind of be separate from that somehow. That's just it's just been confusing to unpick it all and really kind of get my head around it. So that in essence is the question.
I know Joseph can speak more specifically to the mechanics of why even the decentralized aspect becomes problematic in the future scenarios, but I would just say what I try to, my entry into the blockchain space was about putting children on blockchain for social credit scoring. And I don't think that it's ever intended to be separate. Like, it is all that whole package. So if you're buying into the idea of blockchain, you're buying into the idea that humans can be part of global supply chains too, and that they're part of a decentralized web in which the technology is largely military. And that clearly the blockchain is meant to structure the augmented reality, mixed reality world that is run by the state intelligence and the digital twinning. So it's a kind of a package deal to say, like, I'm going to carve out this one nice thing I like about blockchain because it's decentralized, because it's tell a better story, right? So they've got a pretty effective story right now. The story they're telling is like, your liberation is in decentralization. And my frame is like, a decentralized prison is still a prison, if that's where it's going. So once you understand the goal is, this mixed reality where you've got engineered nanoparticles and biosensors running through your tissues, the idea that somehow having access to a private chain of transactions is going to truly be liberation. Like, for me, once you understand the totality of the new paradigm shift, it's a bit naive to think that you're actually going to have some security if the whole world is being turned into utility fog. And that's, again, Joseph can speak much more specifically to how the technology has been hijacked and how they can control your use of it, even if it's your own separate private coin. But I would just say, even within the Lifecoin frame or some of these pitches around local currency, and Joseph can speak to that, it's part of global supply chain. So if what you're trying to do is come up with an alternative currency that is based in your community, those existed during the Depression. Like those existed long before. You don't need a digital system to do that. And in fact, if you try to do a digital system with a small number of servers, you have a security risk. And then if you're doing it with large numbers, is it because you're really just continuing to be part of a globalized world? Then it's not really a local currency in per se. So that's where I'm at. But Joseph, I'm sure, can speak to the particulars of the tech.
Well, I just wanted to add what Allison said is correct. If you tried to create a local crypto economy, it wouldn't work because you would need a small number. You would have you would have a small number of servers that would act as your mining nodes. A node being a computer, part of a graph, because that's what a network is a bunch of nodes and lines that connect each other. So the security, the strength of a network, of a crypto network, depends on the number of nodes or the number of servers that are writing to the blockchain. And if, for example, I had explained to Allison, if there's a handful of servers in the local community, let's say 5 at the most, 5 at the most, and I go to the store, I order from Amazon 6 computers, I have greater, and I add to the network, so now there's 11 computers, but I have power. I have 11 computers. I can override and overrun the consensus power and write to the blockchain at will. And if I can write to the blockchain at will, instead of based on a consensus system, if I can modify it, the rest of the network would not know. So I cheated. And so in that effect, I could accrue certain funds for myself and take your money away. So, and that would be in a small local network, crypto network. It doesn't work unless you have a global wide network. The exception to that is if the network is owned by certified servers, such as banks, institutions, and so forth. In that case, there's no consensus. It's a centralized power. You can call it decentralized in terms of peer-to-peer, but it's centralized consensus. And the same thing with a small network, with a small local economy network, you would not have a decentralized system. So it fails there too. There's many different ways to break the system, and it doesn't work, and there's no solution to it either.
Well, you'd also said in the past that they could make it so you couldn't use certain currencies for certain things. They could just be off limits. Like you can't use that currency at Amazon or Walmart. They could stop the point and then make it useless, especially as they're consolidating the supply chains and the ownership. And then something about the other layer, like that there was that layer written in that like made everything broken that was tied to the Rothschilds. I can't remember the name of that layer thing.
Okay, yeah. Sure, I'll add to this. As far as the supply chain is concerned, everything is going on to the entire supply chain is being placed onto a blockchain. So it won't be long, because it's happening right now. It will not be long before every single item that you can purchase, that you can transact for, will be on a blockchain. So imagine living in a world where everything is on the blockchain and there's universal basic income, cash is gone, we live in a cashless society, and you are afforded these I call them social carbon credit tokens, because it's going to be tied to climate control, climate, whatever the crisis, the made up crises. Okay. So anyhow, so you're going to be afforded tokens based on your energy production and how green you are. So now, in order to get any of these access to any of these resources that's on the blockchain, you'll have to buy from stores or outlets or vendors or machines that, or online services that will accept your money. The money that they'll be accepting from you is your central bank digital currency. Because by this time, and it could be about 2-3 years from now, 5 years from now, this is what they're working on. The Federal Reserve is bringing in central bank digital currency. So you have to use this token. However, let's say I happen to own Bitcoin or Ethereum or Litecoin or Monero or whatever, So in theory, I could use those tokens because I invested in that. But it doesn't really help you much if inflation has driven everything up. And so the demand comparative to the value of your crypto token might be overmatched. A loaf of bread might cost $1,000, and you think you've got it made because you've got $10,000 in crypto. $10,000 of crypto gives you 10 loaves of bread. So that's how the market works. Okay, so your crypto has no value until you go to spend it, and the person that's in charge of the supply chain, the resource, he gets to make the price. He gets to make the price of his product. So the other thing is that if you want to exchange your money, your crypto, there may not be no exchange from your crypto, generic crypto, or just crypto X to CBDC, central bank digital currency. So there may not be an exchange. There may be no gateway. There may be nothing that allows you to exchange. So your money, which could possibly not be allowed at the vending machines, online, at the online retail outlets, or your local stores that have point of sales terminals, your money might not be accepted. It might be a reject. You have Ethereum, reject. Bitcoin, reject. All this, it's done automated by AI. So you, as far as you're concerned, you could have $1 million, but if you can't get to your resources, if the technocratic system has completely shielded you away, then you have no access. And if you try to go to a local economy, it may be pointless. It may not work. So this is one of the dangers that I try to point out. Now, as far as Bitcoin, in 2017, Bitcoin was having this big battle called, it was called SegWit. And basically, the SegWit stands for segregated witness or transaction. So they were fighting over whether they should make the Bitcoin block, the transaction block, 1 megabyte or 2 megabytes. I'm not going to get too much into the details, but that was the big battle. So you had a company, Blockstream, which is John, I forgot his name, John Back. I think his name is John Back, who many believe may be Satoshi Nakamoto. He's the CEO of Bitcoin, of Blockstream. And Blockstream is funded by the Rockefeller, not the Rockefeller, the Bilderberg Group and AXA, AXA investment. So he was getting, he was trying to push a new layer onto Bitcoin. What's called, the Lightning network layer, or the Lightning transaction layer. And so what this layer allowed one to do was two parties could transact without going through the Bitcoin consensus, which is what makes Bitcoin so great, right? Because there's a proof of work consensus, kind of like a lottery, a random lottery, and whoever wins randomly gets to win that Bitcoin. Well, you can skip that transaction part, the consensus part, and just do the transaction between two people and a third party, which could be a bank or an insurance company. So it totally bypasses the entire Bitcoin process. So Blockstream added this layer. They added the Lightning Network, which allows rich people to transact really fast without using the protocol. And to me, that was the day that Bitcoin got hijacked. And now they're going to add another one. They're adding another layer. I think it's October, November. I forgot. It's called Taproot. Taproot. Bitcoin is adding a smart contract capability, just like Ethereum. It's going to be a full smart contract, which allows you to do conditions. So you can't buy or sell anything unless you meet a condition. So, which is to me bad news. So the person that wrote the program and all the miners around the world approved. They approved it. They approved it last month. The person that wrote it was the chief engineer of Blockstream, the same company again. I'm telling you. So Bitcoin has been compromised. Blockstream, which works for the big banks, is in control.
I'm just going to add something that when Tom was speaking, and he spoke about Dollar Vigilante, that's Jeff Berwick, right? He was Canadian. He's taken Mexican citizenship now. It's Jeff Berwick, and he's quite, he's quite a hero in the radical rebels world. So it's very interesting that you brought up Dollar Vigilante, because I'd see if you all agree with this, is that I think crypto has also been positioned as a kind of, rebel response to everything that's going on. Like, we're out here and we're just starting our own world that has nothing to do with this crap world that you all have been running with governments, and we're going to go our way. And Jeff Berwick, especially, because this is what turned me on to him, really appeals to, people who are not with the government system or what's been going on and how it's rolling out. He is he's one of these major influencers who's super appealing to people that would look to, that would not jump on something that was issued by the government or coming from the government. He's got everybody rallied over. He's got a huge following rallied over to that. He does these big festivals down in Mexico as well. That has,
yeah, so true. Yeah. I used to follow him back then, and to me, he appeals to the things that you want to hear, and he's really good. He's a salesman. He's a really good salesman. He used to be a money consultant, and then he got into the crypto. Onto the crypto bandwagon, but he has a shady past. I did a little research. I don't just go follow people unless I do some kind of past, some checkup. So he had a really shady past. And to me, the danger of Jeff Berwick, okay, he used to advertise a few things, and I used to check up on it, and I used to go, for example, he would give incredible recommendations of a particular coin, and saying that he knows the person and the person's working on it and this is going places and everybody should jump on it. So what I would do is, because I'm a developer, I'm not an investor, I'm a developer first, right? I wanted to see the crypto's source code because it's supposed to be open source. I go to the GitHub, I search the code, and thank goodness, because it's open source, I can see who's worked on it. I can see the little graphs of all the developers. And in almost every single case, Jeff Berwick's, the people that he would recommend, there was only one developer, There was no team of developers, and the work was done for only 1 week. 1 week of work, and no updating. And it'll go for months, never being revisited again. He's a con man.
Well, can I just chime in?
The value goes up because everybody's rushing in, and he's already invested because he bought a whole bunch of them at dirt cheap price. So now the value goes up. He's got all these coins that he bought at 0.1 cent. Now they cost about $1 or 50 cents. He's cashed out. He cashes out, and it crashes because it's garbage. So he to me has no reputation. He doesn't have a reputation. He's a, what's the word that you would use? Invalidated. Yeah.
Well, I would just, my perspective on this again, because I think this is this moment of reckoning as I see it, like in my lens, and that there are tremendous environmental implications for the resources that go into managing blockchain and all of the energy systems and everything. And while I totally understand that the whole Agenda 21 environmental is hijacked, I do feel like a reflection about reciprocity and right relationship to the earth is central to all of this, especially as if what we're fighting is synthetic biology and biotechnology, is that we actually have to reposition our relationship to other natural systems, which to me, the crypto space becomes hyper capitalist almost. And then like, if at the same time people are making speculative money while looking the other way, while, you know, poor children in pre-K and Cape Town, South Africa are put on the blockchain, but that's fine. And, you know, and I was asked to participate in a resistance gathering at Independence Mall last December, and he was one of among a slate of speakers. And for various reasons, I declined to be a part because it wasn't consistent with my value system, particularly given that they were speaking, you know, 50 feet from where President Washington kept people enslaved in a city of free blacks. So like, I'm like, karmically, that's not a good look, like to try to assert this without understanding the broader history. But when I look back, like his presentation was sort of, he was piped in on a screen, but he was in like a very trendy clothing, standing in front of an infinity pool on the side of a mountain, you know, a hillside in Acapulco, you know, for this presentation. And for me, if what we're talking about is women, grandmothers, people of the earth, like to try to balance out what this thing actually is that is coming, like how did we get here that we think that biodigital convergence is a thing, that really the whole central like premise of a military spatial web with digital currency, whatever the nature of it, is the antithesis of those of us who want to fight it from a principled position. And I totally understand people's like fear for their financial security or trying to find a way out and feeling like that this might be the way. But I think if you zoom out and see the bigger picture and how it fits in, it's hard to reconcile those two value systems. And so I think people, they're gonna have to figure out what road they're on.
The thing with Jeff Berwick that I want to add is he appeals to the person strictly because of the cryptocurrency portion of blockchain, because blockchain is much more than just cryptocurrency. That's his forte. His so to speak, his loudspeaker is in trying to tell you that you can have your own money and be free of banks and be in control of banks and governments. But it's more like to me, he's more like a Pied Piper, because he never talks about the bigger pending threat, which is the smart contracts and the applications of smart contracts, what smart contracts is and how it can be used horrendously. He never talks about that. And so him trying to be this libertarian that's based on, you know, libertarian, a crypto warrior libertarian, and dragging all the libertarians with him, because he's a big voice, down that road onto the blockchain space, is dangerous, because they're all on that. If you support quote unquote blockchain, which is a generic term, because there's different types of blockchains. If you support blockchain, then you're feeding into surveillance state system, because the surveillance is based on blockchain. You're based on a predatory system network. You really are. So, yeah, that is exactly what is happening. And so you're feeding into, you're feeding into the singularity net, the singularity, because there's the singularity, the singularity itself cannot work. It just simply can't work unless you feed it crypto. And so whenever you go onto an exchange, you give your money to the bank, and the bank, takes you into a Coinbase, and Coinbase gives you tokens, and then you start buying all your different tokens, which is, by the way, another port. Again, no anonymity. So anyway, you go in and you start buying crypto. Oh, I'm going to buy a little bit of Monero. I'm going to buy a little bit of Litecoin, a little bit of Ethereum, Ether. And so all this transaction is feeding into the singularity, because the singularity, for example, requires ether tokens. It won't work unless you feed it ether tokens. So if I'm somebody who wants to, if I'm a store that's using Bitcoin, and I want to enlist the services of the singularity, I have Bitcoin. It takes ether. It automatically will go through an exchange. Automatically goes through an exchange that's recognized by the bank, by the federal government. Okay, by the way, in case you didn't know. So it goes to the recognized exchange, and then it gets converted, and then it goes to the singularity. So me buying these coins in the crypto space is all helping, no matter how you look at it, even if you don't directly do it yourself, is helping to feed the beast, which is the singularity, even if you're not choosing to do so. Yeah. It's when you take a microscope and you look really close, it's scary. You discover a lot. Okay.
Could I say something too? Sorry, Tom, you want to go ahead? Go ahead.
But yeah, I also wanted to say, yeah, thanks. That gives me that really gives me a much, everything, and that gives me a much clearer understanding of the whole bigger picture. So thank you.
Sure. I'm just going to be real quick, because I want to reference what Isabella was saying. And I just realized Julie's on here, who's a friend of ours. And I was just going to say this, and then I just saw that Julie's on here. When you were speaking about, what do we do? Do we speak to the person next to us? Do we speak to one friend and convince them? Do we, how is it that we, how do we do it? How do we change the tide? And I was going to say, a friend of ours, Julie, without realizing that she's right there, has said what we need for that critical mass tipping point where the information spills over into the morphogenetic field and that 100th monkey effect is 3.14% of our population, of our global population. We need 3.14% of our global population to be on with this information. And it'll cause that mass spillover, that critical mass that goes into. I'd love for you to explain it, Julie, but I think Tom wants to say something, so I'm going to mute myself. But this is such a moment, because I was just going to say that, and then I saw this red top pop up, and there you are. Perfect. So I'll mute myself.
We just acknowledging that I know Alison's needs to leave in a minute, and Deepti, you do too. So just acknowledging. It'd be nice maybe before you leave just to say goodbye, and we'll end soon, but if there's other voices before we leave as well.
I have two short pieces, well, one shortish piece on, it was more around the rise of Greta, and it was like what climate marchers should know. And it was really about the finance mechanism, not strictly about blockchain, because at that time I was not integrating it into all of the ESG investments. But actually I had a friend who translated that into Norwegian, because Norway is such a center of this. And then I have a much larger one that is my time capsule that I literally wrote the week before the pandemic was declared, for a gathering of people at the United Nations that never happened because of the pandemic, that lays out the Sustainable Development Goals. So, I mean, I haven't written one specifically for blockchain, and then maybe that's the short blockchain piece, like the consumable, that is a clearly, because all of the carbon credit trading, the ESG, the equity is going to be tied to metrics that will be tracked on blockchain. And, you know, just building up what Joseph had said before about, you know, the utility of, really, it's just, you can have as much money on paper, but if you can't access things you want to acquire to live off of, food or shelter or whatever you need, it's kind of worthless. You know, it's the wheelbarrows full of, you know, paper money in Germany, you know, in the lead up that in hyperinflation, or if you can't even use it, I'm sorry, we don't take your wheelbarrow full of money here, then it's useless. And I think what they will put is the central bank digital currency, but increasingly money, the idea of money as something that is a fiat currency is going away. And what it's going to be replaced with is behavioral script. And so if what we talk about is, if you can picture the era of the company town where they set the prices, they control the entire society, is the children have been being conditioned, at least in our school districts, with behavioral currency. Literally, it's called positive behavior reinforcement system or something, PBIS, and they have tickets, and they will pay children in behavior points. And so that modeling is coming through for everyone now, that you will be paid in script that will be redeemable, you know, for the items they so choose to allow you to acquire with your script. But that's the future of blockchain currency, is a script based. It's nothing like the idea of money that we currently hold. So, I mean, I'll keep that in mind in terms of trying to put together the rewilding specifically within the context of the pandemic, perpetual pandemic scenario that we're facing. This is a structure of the World Bank specifically, and I have a blog piece that talks about their financials, that their intention is that the story they intend to tell is that people are a blight on the planet, and they can only harm nature, and they must stay in their smart city pen, which is based on the Indian reservation model, and that nature can only be good if people are kept out of it. And by the way, nature is incredibly dangerous because it's harboring all of these viruses that are getting ready to jump on you if you get too close. And so that is the way each of those is their own social impact market. There's the impact market about managing the people. There's the impact market about managing nature. All of it is on blockchain. You know, they're going to blockchain the trees, the fish, the microbiomes, all of it. And so they're playing both sides against the middle. But the question is, there's this IXO Foundation video that is really only 2 minutes, and we can put that, you know, out with it. But it shows a world that is overlaid in computer code under the guise of sustainability and digital identity. No one left behind. But the trees are covered in code. The oceans are covered in code. Everything is covered in code. And so I do have to believe that we can get through to the youth still to say, this isn't electrical pollution. You are doing this green agenda, but what you are doing is essentially erasing the whole real world to overlay this thing that is serving finance capital that is military. And that is not a super hard story to sell people if you have a good solid visual and a few backup documents. You've just got to break that Greta spell.
Yeah, thank you. That Greta is just so at the heart of this, because, you know, the young people, that is the spell. Exactly. Thank you so much.
There's no climate change.
Yeah.
There might be geoengineering, military weaponization of the atmosphere.
The Earth is getting cooler. than it's ever been so far in history. And it's just the cycle she just keeps going through. There's no climate change. Julie, can you talk about can you just tell us quickly about the 3.14%? Is it possible?
I mean, there's not that much more to say. The number is debated, all right? The super conservative number of a tipping point is 10%. And, you know, then the super optimistic one is more like 3 something. I thought maybe it was 3.4, but 3.14 is pi, you know, that's very magical too. I could roll with that, you know. What I know is that as we heal ourselves and are able to hold a higher frequency in our body of like really intense love, of just like feeling super jazzed to be alive, and for the opportunity to be the resistance, and for the opportunity to build community, and for the opportunity to open up avenues for us to heal individually and collectively. When you heal yourself, your vibration drags up the collective vibration, and it allows other people that maybe you're trying to physically message to them, but they can't hear you because they're layered over with all this density and programming. But when you heal yourself and make it a mission to heal yourself, your vibe is going to shoot up, and you're going to be able to hold more joy and compassion and expansion. Joe, your amazing, extraordinary contribution of your essay about love just shows that love is expansion. So when you're in fear, you literally like contract back into yourself. So whenever we can hold the vibration in our bodies of expansion, no matter what comes toward us, we don't clamp down and say, ooh, that feels yucky, I don't like it. You can say like, oh, breathe into this new space, I wonder what happens next. Instead of meeting like opposition with contraction, we have to train our bodies on a frequency level to meet it with expansion. And we expand, then the whole collective vibration goes up. Then the people you were trying to message to in 4D are finally able to hear you because you made vibrational space for them to come up. In the vacuum that we create as we rise, other people will rise, and suddenly they'll be able to hear us. So I just want to encourage everyone, as much as we're focused on outward stuff and focusing on, you know, affecting other people, one of the biggest points of leverage, at least half and half, outside actions, but inside, if you're doing your own excavations and getting rid of density from wounds that never belong to you, then other people rise as a function of our rising, not because we're trying to explain something to them that they are unable to hear because they're carrying too much density. So thank you for the opportunity to say something. I hope that was a good contribution.
Beautiful, absolutely. Yes. I wonder, shall we invite, thank you, Julie. I absolutely, feel that and experience that, and absolutely affirm that as well. I think the work that we can do within ourselves really opens the gateway, and the density of what we're being with, it can't touch us, you know. We're holding it, but it's not touching. So yeah, I would like to, I know that our panel needs to leave, most of them, so let's have finishing words from anybody that still has some words to share, and we can say goodbye. And so much gratitude for each and everyone that's been here tonight on the call. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you to everyone. And I'd just like to say, we're all aware of the evil plan. We know the evil plan. But as several of the speakers have said, it doesn't have to succeed. And I'd like to sum it up with the words of a song that I learned. I'm not going to sing it, I'll just say it, because it probably won't sound right on the recording. Probably a song that you're familiar with. And it's, the power of love is here now. The power of now is here now. The power of you and me is here to make magic on earth. And we can win. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So I'm going to take my leave. It's 4 a.m. here. I'd slept earlier so I could do this, but I'm going to take my leave. And thank you so much, Isabella, for inviting me. And thank you to everyone, Judith and Allison and lovely you also. So I'm so happy to have shared this time. And to everyone who was here to listen. And for Julie for showing up. I don't know if you've been here the whole time or you just came, I just realized it was you in the red. Just amazing, amazing. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And until we meet again very soon. Okay.
Well, I'll just ring off as well, but I just consider you all gifts. I mean, Julie, you're right. I mean, once you step into this place, you find the most amazing companions on this road, you know, and we have people here that we've been companions for several years to, you know, the last bunch of months, and now we have new companions and we all learn from each other. So I'm grateful for that. And I love the song lyric, and I guess one of the ones that was given to me and we go out is the, you know, the forget your perfect offering, just ring the bells that you can ring. There is a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. And I think sometimes in our like perfectionist culture, people are hesitant and they're like, I might not do it right. Like, tell me, you know, and I'm like, however you do it, if it comes from a place in your heart, you're doing it right. And so, and you evolve, and the more risks you take, the more you evolve. So thank you for holding this space, Isabella. I think it's been a wonderful conversation, even much wider ranging than I even imagined. And I guess we can thank the blockchain guy for creating this opportunity for us to all interrogate these systems a bit further. But much love to everybody.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you. Incredible
Thank
souls.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Is there any final words, Joe or Judith?
I just wanted to say thank you. I'm not really good with these kind of events, but I just want to say you guys are great. Not to quit. Don't give up. The battle has just begun, really, and it doesn't even have to be a battle. We just have to show up, really, just show up. So I love you all, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you so much, Joseph.
Thank you for having inviting my voice to be a part of this. I'm not sure if it's helped widen any perspective, but I was happy to bring something I see and understand, and to help us sort of grasp what's, you know, coming around us, and just continue to work in cooperation, because cooperation works.
Your story was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, really helpful, Judith, to see how your particular area is being affected. And I think that's true for every area. And I think your story demonstrates that. Thank you so much. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for your attention. And I look forward to sharing more with you and continuing our resistance and our or what did you say, Joseph? What did you say? The military and then the love.
Oh, the full spectrum love.
That's it. Yeah. Let's continue the full spectrum love together in all our unique ways, and to be brave enough to take a look at what's unfolding and to make a stand in our own unique ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night and good day.
Have a good night. Thank you.
That's a good day.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Isabella. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Hi, beautiful people.
Those walk through the zombie apocalypse to the valley of love. I like that one.